When reality far exceeds one's understanding, the Demon King can only sink into a state of agonizing denial. The Demon King had been blinded by illusions, unable to see the cruel reality unfolding right before his eyes. The Demon King's prideful black flames, the weapon that once struck fear into the hearts of many, were now rendered useless against the heroes. Faced with the overwhelming power of the heroes, all of the Demon King's resistance became feeble and meaningless. The hero's blades pierced through the thick, sturdy scales, plunging straight into the Demon King's heart. The Demon King collapsed, unable to comprehend how he had reached this desperate end. The military academy, Burj Diaz was once at the very pinnacle, an exceptional top-ranked student from start to finish. Relying on forbidden knowledge, the Demon King once believed he would seize supreme power. The Demon King would repeatedly kidnap princesses while secretly training the very heroes meant to rescue them. For the Demon King, there was nothing more delicious than the suffering and resentment of the heroes, so finishing them off too early was a mistake. The system's command codes always reminded the Demon King to let the heroes grow before consuming them. Demon King believed that the stronger the heroes became, the more exquisite the flavor of their despair would be. Strictly adhering to that rule, the Demon King was confident that the world would sooner or later be in his grasp. Yet, looking back at his pathetic defeat right on the throne, the Demon King couldn't help but question it all. Why could a ruler like the Demon King possibly suffer such a disastrous defeat? Demon Slayer stared down at the Demon King, wearing a mocking, defiant smirk. The Demon Slayer bluntly declared that those like the Demon King were all losers, exactly the same. The Demon King could not understand why the heroes were always surprised by his plans. The Demon King dismissed the Demon Slayer's words, considering them nothing but nonsense. The Demon Slayer mocked the Demon King for always kidnapping princesses, calling it a foolish act of suicide. The Demon Slayer laughed out loud, advising the Demon King to kill the king instead to incite chaos throughout the kingdom rather than kidnapping princesses. Demon King retorted, arguing that if he killed the king, someone else would take the throne and he himself would not be able to grow stronger. The Demon King affirmed that killing the king would violate the dogmas of the system's command codes. The Demon Slayer sneered, thanking the Demon King for the monsters sent to train them. The Demon Slayer taunted that when the heroes reached the tower, things would become much more interesting. The Demon Slayer ridiculed the fact that the first floor of the tower was filled only with weak monsters. The Demon King growled, emphasizing that letting the heroes survive was necessary to accumulate energy according to the doctrine. The Demon Slayer delivered a fatal blow, putting an end to the Demon King's sermon. The Demon King screamed in agony as he realized his mistake. The Demon Slayer stood watching as the Demon King collapsed, ending the reign of a failed ruler. The Demon Slayer laughed manically, treating this tower as nothing more than a hunting ground for people like him. The heroes cheered in unison, unhesitatingly calling the Demon King their sponsor, the one who helped them become stronger than ever. Amidst the insulting cheers, the Demon King collapsed at the feet of the Demon Slayer, his broken body unable to resist. The Demon King struggled to rise, his bloodshot eyes looking up, unable to believe what he had just heard. Demon Slayer maintained his cold-blooded smile, admitting that the Demon King had killed many heroes but that only served to make the Demon Slayer's reputation even greater. Not giving the Demon King time to react, the Demon Slayer swung his greatsword, ready to finish the Demon King off right there. The Demon King gritted his teeth, his resentment burning in his chest at being looked down upon by the heroes to this extent. The Demon King's hand clenched tightly, blood dripping down. He asked himself what was the point of the Demon King's power if he had to endure such humiliation. The Demon King howls in agony, refusing to accept such a pathetic end. Magic power erupts, the Demon King's eyes blaze with intensity as he roars, asserting the dominance of an emperor. A flash of light streaks across the room. The Demon King pours all his remaining strength into a final counterattack. Blood splatters everywhere as the Demon King unleashes a desperate strike in his final moments of life. The heroes are left in shock, astonished by the ferocious resistance coming from the nearly exhausted Demon King. As blood hits the floor, a chilling silence falls over the room. With a thunderous thud, the Demon King collapses, signaling the end of a legend. Even lying in a pool of his own blood, the Demon King screams a curse, vowing to make the Demon King Slayer and the heroes pay a heavy price. In the Demon King's hateful gaze, the sight of the Demon King Slayer standing there feels like a final, stinging humiliation. The Demon King Slayer looks down, completely indifferent to the Demon King's final struggles. The Demon King Slayer activates his magic, his sword igniting with a deadly purple radiance. A lethal blow strikes the Demon King directly, leaving him no chance to react. The Demon King sees through it all, deciding to sacrifice his final breath to execute a crazed scheme. The Demon King Slayer freezes, an intuition telling him that something is going terribly wrong. The ground cracks wide open as purple energy erupts violently, as if intending to swallow the entire tower. Demon King screams, magical energy enveloping him and transforming into a terrifying storm. The magical explosion tears through space, pushing back everyone standing nearby. A brilliant purple light engulfs everything. A destructive power is truly awakening. The purple magical object detonates, sweeping away everything in sight like a storm of destruction. In his final moments, Burge Diaz utters a bitter remark. He realizes the code he once worshipped was nothing but a twisted joke concocted by the heroes to humiliate the Demon King. If he could do it all over again, Burge Diaz swears he would never follow those ridiculous rules ever again. Burge Diaz wants to completely wipe out those irrational shackles, turning them into nothing more than. Suddenly, Burge Diaz snaps awake. He looks around in confusion as the familiar setting of the graduation ceremony appears before his eyes. Burge Diaz stands still amidst the crowd, his heart filled with bewilderment. What on earth is happening? Life still flows through his body. Burge Diaz is stunned to realize he is still breathing. A strange voice rings out, calling Burge Diaz to the stage. He is stunned. Isn't this the past? Before Burge Diaz can even process his thoughts, the coordinator urges him to hurry forward. Burge Diaz's footsteps are heavy. He still cannot believe what he is witnessing. Burge Diaz silently asks himself, could this possibly be a dream? The headmaster suddenly appears, blocking Burge Diaz's path with a cryptic smile that sends a shiver down his spine. Headmaster points to the bright red emblem on Burge Diaz's chest, the ultimate symbol of the Demon King. As the truth gradually comes to light, Burge Diaz is struck by a realization. It really is the graduation ceremony from 15 years ago. Burge Diaz has truly traveled back in time. Though he doesn't know how, Burge Diaz knows he must seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The coordinator urges Burge Diaz to read the oath representing the graduating students. The Demon King's code appears before Burge Diaz's eyes, blinding and oppressive. Burge Diaz stares at that code, the trauma of the past rushing back to haunt him. The rules that Burge Diaz had been forced to memorize countless times in the past. Burge Diaz had spent his entire life following them blindly. In the end, they only turned Burge Diaz into a pawn for the heroes who pushed him to his death. Burge Diaz took a deep breath. He had to read these deadly laws once again. Burge Diaz vowed to abide by these principles despite the hatred filling his heart. Burge Diaz gritted his teeth, trying to suppress the fury burning in his chest. The moderator kept urging him on, demanding that Burge Diaz read the Demon King's inviolable code of law immediately. Facing the pressure to recite the Demon King's law, Burge Diaz flatly refused. Burge Diaz's firm resolve made the surrounding atmosphere extremely tense. The Demon King's subordinates stood frozen, unable to believe what Burge Diaz had just said. Burge Diaz roared in anger, declaring that the Demon King's law was nothing more than sheer stupidity. Burge Diaz's eyes were ablaze. He held the Demon King's archaic rules in total contempt. Not stopping there, Burge Diaz bluntly insulted the Demon King's subordinates, calling them useless trash. Burge Diaz's harsh insults left the Demon King's subordinates stunned and speechless. Burge Diaz's rage exploded, shattering all boundaries of restraint. Madness was written all over Burge Diaz's face as he continued to hurl insults. A cry of shock rang out, shattering the silence that had gripped the academy. Under the cold moonlight, the Magic Academy was plunged into an atmosphere of deep unease. And just like that, Burge Diaz, the most elite student in the academy's history, had officially become its most notorious rebel. A powerful punch slammed into the table, sending shockwaves that rippled through the space. Alkane Blamoth, the Grand Duke of the Demon Realm, roared in fury. He could not accept that Burge Diaz dared to defy the Demon King's laws and threatened to take Burge Diaz's life right then and there. However, faced with Burge Diaz's unwavering attitude, Alkane Blamoth reluctantly offered one final chance. Alkane Blamoth demanded that Burge Diaz retract his arrogant words and bow an apology to the entire Demon Realm, otherwise he would be exiled to Arian. The very name Arian sent the crowd into a frenzy. Everyone knew it was a death trap, a graveyard for countless Demon Kings throughout history. Those around them began to murmur, believing that Burge Diaz deserved death more than he deserved such leniency. Alkane Blamoth glared at Burge Diaz, confident that Burge Diaz understood the terrors of Arian all too well. The jewelry on Alkane Blamoth began to glow with a cold light, exuding the overwhelming pressure of a ruler. Without a moment's hesitation, Burge Diaz challenged Alkane Blamoth back. He accepted his exile to that land of death. Burge Diaz declared he would prove to Alkane Blamoth that the laws he worshipped were completely worthless. Alkane Blamoth, having lost all patience, immediately activated a magic circle to exile Burge Diaz to Arian on the spot. Despite being the top graduate, Burge Diaz was stripped of all privileges and no one was permitted to accompany or assist him. As the spatial gate opened, Alkane Blamoth forbade Burge Diaz from returning to the Demon Realm until his conquest was complete. Burge Diaz was swept into the spatial rift, fully aware that the chaos he had caused led to this inevitable outcome. Burge Diaz fell into the lands of Arian, where the very heroes who had once ended his life were waiting. Burge Diaz recalled his misguided belief that only the highest difficulty was worthy of his own abilities. It was that very arrogance that had cost him his life. Burj Diaz realized that the heroes had thoroughly exploited the Demon King's laws for their own gain. A terrifying explosion occurred at the Erzest mountain range on the northern continent, marking the vengeance-filled return of Burj Diaz. Amidst the vast snowy landscape, Burj Diaz appeared with a pair of majestic black wings. Burj Diaz swore he would not let himself be deceived again. He would use those very laws to his own advantage. Look in Burj Diaz's eyes burned with determination. He was ready for his plan of subversion. Gordon Dyrek carefully shaved, preparing for a new day of work. Gordon Dyrek adjusted his attire. A polished appearance was his top priority. Gordon Dyrek was confident in his image. After all, he was the valedictorian of the Demon Realm Academy. The Demon King Military Academy trains future Demon Kings, while the Demon Realm Academy prepares those who serve them. The students gossiped about Gordon Dyrek, the recent top graduate who would be serving under Burj Diaz. Another student sighed with regret, whispering to himself that if he had just tried a little harder, he could have become Burj Diaz's aide. Gordon Dyrek smiled reassuringly, stating that the Demon Kings they serve are all individuals of exceptional talent. Gordon Dyrek offered a meaningful smile, firmly asserting that no one could ever compare to Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz stood tall amidst the admiration. He was a rare genius of the Demon Dragon clan, a living legend in the history of the Demon Realm. Gordon Dyrek expressed his absolute loyalty, believing that under Burj Diaz, any territory would be conquered. The monument commemorating the legend of the Demon King and the vice-commander of Burj Diaz loomed large as a testament to supreme power. Gordon Dyrek, full of excitement, craved to carve his name into the history of the Demon Realm and did not forget to turn and ask for Burj Diaz's opinion. But in response to that enthusiasm, Burj Diaz coldly uttered two powerful words: "I refuse." The blunt rejection left Gordon Dyrek stunned. The smile on his face vanished, replaced by sheer astonishment. Gordon Dyrek stammered in fear as the name Demon King's Code echoed like an ominous omen. Burj Diaz, showing no mercy, roared that thing was nothing more than a bunch of common orcs. The collapse of his illusions left Gordon Dyrek completely shattered, his face contorted in panic. In the depths of the Erzest mountain range on the northern continent, Burj Diaz sets foot. Bound by the harsh law of the Demon Realm, the top-ranking Demon Lord must serve the top-ranking Demon Lord. Gordon Dyrek is shaken. He cannot believe what is unfolding, and the terror is plain to see on his face. Gordon Dyrek can only wonder why things have spiraled into such a disaster. Gordon Dyrek bitterly realizes that although Burj Diaz promised no other demons would accompany him, Burj Diaz's very appearance is still a minimal mercy. Gordon Dyrek looks toward Burj Diaz, his eyes filled with bewilderment and helplessness in the face of the current situation. Burj Diaz steps forward, extending his hand with a faint smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Gordon Dyrek." Gordon Dyrek is still reeling from the shock. He doesn't understand why Burj Diaz would do such a thing. Gordon Dyrek observes Burj Diaz, and the suspicion in his heart grows deeper by the moment. Gordon Dyrek shouts about the Demon Lord Code and the dangers of being an Aryan, feeling as though he has just received a death sentence. Burj Diaz replies calmly, advising Gordon Dyrek to stay calm, as stress will only make him lose his hair. Burj Diaz wonders if Gordon Dyrek has truly changed to this extent. Burj Diaz is full of determination, believing that no matter how difficult the road ahead may be, they can overcome it all together. Burj Diaz reflects, wondering if he told Gordon Dyrek that he had just returned from the past, whether Gordon Dyrek would think he had gone insane. Gordon Dyrek pants heavily, seemingly exhausted after this series of events. Gordon Dyrek apologizes for his shameful behavior and asserts that he will complete the assigned task. Burj Diaz can only sigh at Gordon Dyrek's attitude. The rule was set: the tower must not be located in a place too dangerous or hidden, so that heroes can find their way to it. Gordon Dyrek remarks that this place is too harsh, teeming with monsters, making it difficult for humans to set foot here. But Burj Diaz has made his decision. He will build his tower right here. A brilliant red burst of power surges beneath Burj Diaz's feet, marking the spot where the legendary tower will begin. Simply piercing the ground and sacrificing the blood of a demon lord, the legendary tower will begin to sprout. Gordon Dyrek shouts in outrage at Burj Diaz's actions, claiming it is a grave violation of the Demon Lord laws, but Burj Diaz coolly replies that he is not bound by such oaths. Burj Diaz understands Gordon Dyrek's contempt, for to a demon, casting aside deeply ingrained beliefs is never an easy task. Burj Diaz's gaze is sharp and cold, hiding a steely determination. Burj Diaz's hand clenches, fresh blood seeping out as he prepares for the summoning ritual. Burj Diaz loudly declares to Gordon Dyrek that the Demon Lord laws are nothing but food for orcs, especially in this land of Aryan. The ground begins to shake violently beneath Gordon Dyrek's feet, leaving him utterly shaken. Cracking sounds echo through the space, signaling that a terrifying change is underway. A surge of burning red magical power explodes, and the surrounding space seems torn apart by the immense force. A stream of brilliant red energy flows from Burj Diaz's hand directly into the ground, creating a ghostly resonance. Massive magic circle radiates outward, enveloping both Burj Diaz and Gordon Dyrek in a torrent of red light. Burj Diaz continues to explain, his voice full of hidden meaning echoing in mid-air. Burj Diaz smirks, calling this the land of heroes, a notion that makes Gordon Dyrek feel extremely uneasy. Images of heroes emerge, serving as proof of their dense presence in this location. The system begins to scan and identify, confirming Burj Diaz's race as the fire demon dragon. The summoning tower rises from the ground, shaking the very sky with its overwhelming power. Burj Diaz explains that this is exactly why demon lords keep falling. The heroes have grasped the patterns and used those very laws to strike back at them. Gordon Dyrek exclaims in astonishment, unable to believe what he has just heard regarding the hero's law. The tower looms tall amidst the snowy landscape, majestic and full of menace. Burj Diaz and Gordon Dyrek stand before the tower, their backs looking small against the colossal structure that has just been summoned. Gordon Dyrek couldn't help but be stunned, confirming that Burj Diaz had truly built an entire tower right in this place. Burj Diaz ordered them to enter, leaving Gordon Dyrek's astonishment behind. Inside the first floor of the tower, a vast and empty space appeared before their eyes. Gordon Dyrek wondered why the tower was completely empty, a stark contrast to the complex structures or swarms of monsters he had expected. Gordon Dyrek suddenly understood this was what the Grand Duke meant about there being no special privileges. It ventured deep into the fifth floor, known as the Demon King's lair, but every level was as silent as the grave. Gordon Dyrek sighed, accepting the tower's current state but resolved to strictly adhere to the rules set by the next Demon King's law. Rule number 2 appeared. The Demon King is strictly required to kidnap a prince or princess. Victims must be high-profile figures, those standing in the noble line of succession. Gordon Dyrek bowed to request permission to offer advice to Burj Diaz as a subordinate, and Burj Diaz was ready to listen. Without hesitation, Gordon laid out a cruel plan: target the most noble princess of a neighboring kingdom, turning her suffering into the ultimate power-up for his master. He roared, volunteering to be the ultimate henchman, but Gordon coldly threw back a stern command: get out and guard the tower. Don't let the Demon King's lair be left without its master. Seeing him return to his peak form, the minions rejoiced, excitedly believing that this was just the beginning of a spectacular comeback. Before they could enjoy the glory, a chilling voice suddenly rang out. Planning to kidnap whom? Speak up. Before he could offer an excuse, a thunderous punch landed square on his face, leaving him speechless. Without a second of delay, he spread his demon wings and soared toward a kingdom at the far end of the continent to carry out his plan. As night fell, he landed on the balcony of the target kingdom, ready for a bloody massacre. Without a word of warning, the door to death swung open, and he stared coldly down at his prey, who stood frozen in sheer terror. The target was chosen. The 13th princess, the least known card, would be the key to this earth-shattering kidnapping. Under the cold moonlight, he coldly declared, "Princess, I have come to take you away." Burj Diaz stood tall, his cold, sharp gaze fixed upon Ernyan Hildren, who sat there in a state of utter shock. Ernyan Hildren trembled, her eyes wide with terror as she gasped out a question regarding Burj Diaz's identity. Burj Diaz coldly declared himself a Demon King, stating that his sole purpose was to kidnap Ernyan Hildren. Instead of panicking, Ernyan Hildren calmly retorted with a challenging question that left Burj Diaz completely stunned. Burj Diaz frowned, unable to believe his ears at the strange demeanor displayed by Ernyan Hildren. Ernyan Hildren smiled, nonchalantly accepting Burj Diaz's demand as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Ernyan Hildren's composure made Burj Diaz suspect a hidden plot, but she simply claimed it was the fate of a princess. Dismissing any sense of complacency, Burj Diaz asserted that he would never be ensnared by Ernyan Hildren's petty tricks. Ernyan Hildren replied with a look of innocence, completely denying that she had set this trap for Burj Diaz. Despite maintaining a tough exterior, Burj Diaz could not hide the growing unease creeping into his mind. Refusing to let doubt stand in his way, Burj Diaz decided to whisk Ernyan Hildren away from that place. Burj Diaz and Ernyan Hildren departed together, heading toward the Burj Tower, which loomed over the frozen Urzist Mountains. Burj Diaz carried Ernyan Hildren into the castle, where the elf subordinate stood waiting to respectfully welcome him. Burj Diaz ordered that Ernyan Hildren be confined to the 4th floor. The elf subordinate was surprised she wasn't thrown into the dungeon. The elf subordinate whispered to Burj Diaz that he had an urgent matter to report immediately. Ernyan Hildren was left all alone in the cold, desolate room on the 4th floor of Burj Tower. Ernyan Hildren sat slumped on the floor, lamenting the cold and harsh conditions of her confinement. Gazing at the empty room devoid of any servants, Ernyan Hildren bitterly realized that she had truly been kidnapped. Ernyan Hildren reminisced about the beautiful garden back home. The stark contrast made her heart ache with longing. The image of the resplendent fountain in the kingdom of Hildren appeared in her mind like a distant, luxurious comfort. Despite her ironic predicament, Ernyan Hildren smiled enigmatically, telling herself that things weren't all that bad. Burj Diaz raised an eyebrow as he heard the elf subordinate report an invitation from the Beast Tower. The elf subordinate explained that it was a welcome banquet for the newly inaugurated Demon King. Burj Diaz sneered, dismissing it as a farce staged by old fools desperate to impose outdated customs upon him. The elf subordinate mused on the arrogance of the Demon Kings and how the Aryan dimension had forced them into an alliance. Burj Diaz pondered, recalling how in his past life he had looked down on other Demon Kings as nothing more than weaklings. Burj Diaz decided that this time he would participate in the game to see how things would unfold. The Beast Tower appeared amidst the untamed wilderness, a place harboring dangerous mysteries. The wolf Lamphif emerged, identifying himself as Draxon, the Demon King of Beasts, radiating authority and feral instinct. The wolf Lamphif let out a defiant roar of laughter, directly confronting Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz coldly questioned the wolf Lamphif. His patience had already reached its limit. Wolf Lamphif growled aggressively, unhesitatingly flinging a piece of meat toward Burj Diaz as a challenge. Burj Diaz didn't flinch, responding with a look of disdain aimed straight at the wolf Lamphif standing before him. The arrogance of the wolf Lamphif made Burj Diaz question everything he had experienced in Aryan. Wolf Lamphif roared, unable to tolerate the insolence Burj Diaz showed toward the Grand Duke. The meat slammed onto the ground, splattering and creating a scene of utter humiliation. The wolf Lamphif laughed maniacally, forcing Burj Diaz to lick up the filth. The wolf Lamphif gloated, imposing humiliating conditions to forgive Burj Diaz for his impudence. Burj Diaz looked calmly at the wolf Lamphif, who was boasting about the laws of the Demon King. Burj Diaz coldly reminded him of the taboo laws shared among the Demon Kings. The atmosphere becomes extremely tense as Burj Diaz prepares to launch a counterattack. A terrifying collision occurs, shattering all remaining patience. Burj Diaz's eyes burn with killing intent, challenging every rule that the wolf Lamphif is desperately clinging to. Wolf Lamphif trembles before the overwhelming killing intent radiating from Burj Diaz. Wolf Lamphif tries to regain his composure, reminding Burj of his master's orders. Burj Diaz turns his back and walks away, leaving Wolf Lamphif stunned by the unexpected news. Burj Diaz asserts his dominance, having found a prey worthy of his interest. The Burj Tower stands tall amidst the snowy landscape, the seat of Burj Diaz's power. The subordinate elf stands respectfully by his side, awestruck by the authority Burj Diaz has just displayed. Burj Diaz orders the subordinate elf to go and check on the situation of Ernyan Hildren. The subordinate elf owes to accept the command, ready to carry out Burj Diaz's every desire. Footsteps echo through the corridor, signaling the beginning of new schemes. Burj Diaz sighs, finding the existence of other demon kings truly troublesome. Burj Diaz contemplates the unfathomable consequences of challenging the rules. Burj Diaz declares firmly that he would rather die than bow before such trash. Burj Diaz reviews the notification board, deciding to rebuild his strength from scratch. The number 13,219 appears, leaving Burj Diaz filled with surprise. Burj Diaz is shaken, questioning why he received so many points. A new notification from the 4th floor of the Burj Tower appears, raising a major question. Wolf Lamphif speaks up to congratulate the new Demon King, admitting that their first meeting wasn't exactly pleasant but still offering praise to Burj Diaz. Wolf Lamphif asserts that such a bold act is not easily pulled off in Aryan. Burj Diaz appears impressed, wondering if the previous violation of the code was merely a deceptive act. Unease consumes Burj Diaz's mind as he realizes something has gone off course. Just then, the subordinate elf rushes in, urging Burj Diaz to immediately appear at the 4th floor of the tower. On the 4th floor, the scene unfolds like a vibrant fairy tale garden with butterflies fluttering by a waterfall. White butterflies dance amidst a forest of pristine white flowers, creating an unusually peaceful atmosphere. A gentle breeze sweeps through, causing the blue butterflies and yellow flowers to sway, signaling the presence of a strange energy source. Burj Diaz cannot help but be shocked by the scene before him, exclaiming in disbelief at what is happening. The system notifies that the 4th floor of the Burj Tower is undergoing naturalization, transforming the place into an entirely different land. Amidst this scenery, Ernyan Hildren appears with a pure aura, surrounded by tiny elemental creatures happily welcoming Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz is stunned. He cannot believe how Ernyan Hildren could perform such large-scale magic right inside the Demon King's tower. Burj Diaz deduces that only a master of the 4 elements could do this, but he is certain he had kidnapped the 13th princess. Burj Diaz doubts the identity of the girl before him, while Ernyan Hildren smiles and asks if he has mistaken her for Princess Elena. Cold sweat trickles down. Burj Diaz panics, praying that his assumption was wrong. Ernyan Hildren confirms her identity, proudly declaring herself the first princess of the Hildren Kingdom. News of Ernyan Hildren being kidnapped by the Demon King rocks the entire Hildren Kingdom. The king will not accept anyone daring to touch his beloved daughter Ernyan Hildren, immediately ordering the mobilization of the entire army and the strongest heroes. The order is issued firmly, demanding the destruction of Burj Diaz and the rescue of Ernyan Hildren. Princess Hilda offers a cryptic smile, challenging Burge Diaz to prove whether he truly has what it takes to control her. Faced with Princess Hilda, Burge Diaz is visibly shaken as he realizes he has been deceived by a master spirit mage. Princess Hilda holds up the family heirloom ring, the ancient magical artifact glowing brilliantly to mask her immense magical power. In the face of Burge Diaz's silence, Princess Hilda continues to provoke him. Does he dare to send her back before it's too late? Burge Diaz falls into deep thought. He understands that if he lets Princess Hilda go now, his reputation will crumble, making it harder than ever to harvest demon energy points. Burge Diaz's gaze turns icy. He decides there is no turning back and is forced to press on with his plan. The system suddenly issues a warning regarding a sharp spike in hostility directed straight at Burge Diaz. Burge Diaz checks the notification board. His total demon energy currently stands at 19,521 points. Burge Diaz smirks, even though his opponent knows his identity. That changes nothing about the current situation. Princess Hilda remains composed, reminding Burge Diaz that no matter what, he will always remain her prisoner. In the kingdom of Hildren, the atmosphere is heavy with tension and gloom. The magnificent castle of the kingdom of Hildren stands tall against the sky, the very place where life or death decisions are being made. King Hildren sits upon his throne, ordering his subordinates to destroy the insolent demon king and bring Princess Hilda back at any cost. The royal advisor trembles as he reports that they have yet to identify the mastermind behind this brutal kidnapping. King Hildren roars in anger. He cannot accept such delays while Princess Hilda is in danger. King Hildren questions his subordinates while the royal advisor begins to raise suspicions regarding similar recent kidnappings. The royal advisor recounts the case of the demon king of desire who once kidnapped a neighboring prince and met a tragic end at the hands of heroes, casting deep doubt on the nature of this incident. The royal advisors are left stunned by the sharp deductions just presented. The truth slowly comes to light. King Hildren cannot hide his trembling as he grips the armrests of his throne. King Hildren's hands shake uncontrollably, fear and rage intertwined. King Hildren realizes with shock that the one behind it all is none other than the new demon king. Royal Knight kneels, reporting urgent news that traces of teleportation magic have been found in the Urzist Mountains. King Hildren is stunned to hear the name Urzist Mountains, a notoriously perilous location. King Hildren's face hardens, his fury reaching its boiling point. The Urzist Mountains, home to Burge Diaz's tower, appear cold and desolate amidst the white snow. At the tower, Balthasar warns Burge Diaz that King Hildren's army has almost arrived. Does he have enough strength to deal with them? Burge Diaz flashes a look of confident and cunning mischief. Burge Diaz reassures his subordinate, telling them there is nothing to worry about. Burge Diaz asserts firmly that King Hildren's royal army will never be able to deploy forces here. King Hildren studies the tactical map, realizing that the vast geographic distance and the obstruction of neutral nations make a rescue mission hopeless. The mysterious villain smirks calculatingly. He nonchalantly states that not every nation is willing to open a path, and in the end, they will all be forced to turn to the Heroes Guild for help. Under mounting pressure, King Hildren has no other choice. He bows his head in exhaustion, his helplessness clear on his face as he makes this difficult decision. Without hesitation, King Hildren orders an urgent message sent to the Heroes Guild, hoping to find a savior for the current dire situation. Towering amidst the icy mountain range, the Heroes Guild appears like an impenetrable fortress, a gathering place for the greatest powers of humanity. Balthasar is visibly surprised. He cannot believe his opponent has calculated everything so thoroughly, knowing the nooks and crannies of Arian like the back of his hand. The mysterious villain chuckles softly. His intimate knowledge of this place leaves others questioning whether he has been here before. King Hildren roars in a fit of rage. He is resentful that no one is willing to step up, feeling those self-proclaimed heroes are unworthy of the title. King Hildren clutches his forehead, sighing in frustration. He recalls the golden age when Arian had countless heroes, back when the Heroes Guild was never as noisy and chaotic as a marketplace. Assembling a team of heroes strong enough is not a task that can be done overnight. The system displays some very costly options. The system screen shows a price tag of 10,000 points for a skeleton unit. Everything has its price. Mysterious villain sits upon his throne, surrounded by floating system notification panels. He realizes that his current pool of demonic energy points is insufficient to face the entire army of heroes. The terror of that overwhelming power still haunts him. It is a fate he himself experienced in the past. He orders his subordinate to contact Draxon immediately. The mysterious villain intends to sell off his demonic energy in exchange for human currency. Balthasar bows to obey. Despite his slight hesitation, Balthasar must carry out his master's will. Balthasar is so shocked he nearly drops his glasses. He cannot believe what he has just heard. Balthasar screams in panic. He cannot comprehend why his master would want to trade a treasure capable of summoning hellish monsters for mere scraps of human coin. The mysterious villain remains calm upon his throne. He explains that his current energy is not enough to stop the heroes, and human currency is the key to turning the tides. Hotenwalk, a fortress city situated near the Erzest Mountains, appears in all its ancient and imposing glory. A mysterious figure approaches the city gate. The heavy sound of his footsteps draws the immediate attention of the guards. The guards instantly block his path and interrogate the stranger. The man replies briefly that he is a mercenary, which only makes the guards more suspicious. With a single casual action, the stranger leaves the two guards stunned. A handful of gleaming gold coins extinguishes all their suspicion. The stranger coldly questions their trust. He knows full well that money is always the most effective common language. Beneath the brilliant blue sky, the stranger muses that he cannot explore this vast city all by himself. He walks through the crowded streets, determined to find a guide who knows the area like the back of their hand. Inside a tavern, mercenaries are busy enjoying their lives. One of them objects to the idea of leaving, claiming that this place is a paradise. He laughs loudly, boasting that as long as the guards take care of the monsters, they can just sit back and reap the profits. To him, Hotenwalk is the ultimate treasure trove. Talk of the new Demon King's tower rising on Mount Erzest becomes the topic of conversation. However, these men dismissively scoff at it, calling it nothing but nonsense rumors. Rumors that the Demon King has kidnapped Princess Hilda of King Hildren are spreading everywhere, leaving these lackeys skeptical. When asked about the Hero Guild refusing a massive sum of money to rescue Princess Hilda, the group begins to murmur in confusion. They assume it must be a scam, as Princess Hilda is King Hildren's most priceless treasure. Draxen stomps his foot emphatically, asserting that the Hero Guild will surely bleed King Hildren dry of his wealth to rescue his daughter. Draxen laughs heartily, agreeing that no one is greedier than those who call themselves heroes. Suddenly, the mysterious villain appears right behind them, whispering a chilling question that leaves Draxen paralyzed with shock. Terrified by this sudden appearance, Draxen lets out a cry of horror upon seeing the mysterious villain. Mysterious villain wears a dangerous smile, realizing they are the perfect source of information and that only one survivor is needed. Refusing to take orders from the mysterious villain in their own base, the subordinates immediately draw their blades and charge at him. In the blink of an eye, the mysterious villain unleashes thunderous punches, taking them down one by one. One remaining subordinate screams in fury, brandishing his weapon as he rushes to attack the mysterious villain. The mysterious villain doesn't even flinch, delivering a devastating counterattack that sends the man collapsing instantly. With a sinister smile, the mysterious villain crushes every obstacle in his path. The brutality of the mysterious villain leaves the last survivor trembling in a cold sweat. From a distance, others begin to aim their crossbows, concentrating their fire on the mysterious villain. A loud blast echoes out, signaling the chaos engulfing the base under the power of the mysterious villain. The mysterious villain grabs the subordinate by the head, forcing him to face the terror head-on. The subordinate trembles and whimpers in despair, seeing the mysterious villain as nothing less than a true monster. Screams echo everywhere as the remaining enemies are defeated by the mysterious villain in an instant. Witnessing the scene, bystanders can't help but feel weary of the relentless violence unleashed by the mysterious villain. The area becomes a scene of devastation, with the bodies of enemies scattered all around the mysterious villain. The mysterious villain threatens the subordinate, forcing him to answer the question if he wishes to keep his life. Having obtained the information, the mysterious villain heads toward a luxurious mansion, a place concealing dark secrets. They walk along a deserted stone path, venturing deep into this shadowy area. Here, the mysterious villain sees miserable people imprisoned within iron cages. The mysterious villain turns to his subordinate and asks if this is what he has been searching for. The mysterious villain then inquires about rarer goods. Immediately, Burge Diaz clutches a bag of gold, his face revealing shock and extreme greed. Sporting a servile grin, Burge Diaz hurriedly bows and gestures for the mysterious villain to follow him to see even more valuable items. Witnessing Burge Diaz's rapid shift in attitude, the mysterious villain feels a sense of quiet contempt. He realizes that humans are no different from demons, blinded by a desperate craving for gold. Following Burge Diaz, the mysterious villain enters a dark dungeon where sinister plots begin to unfold under the flickering torchlight. Balthasar, standing nearby, questions the need to collect human currency, but the mysterious villain coldly replies that he needs it to buy back the enslaved people being held captive. The mysterious villain's gaze rests upon an elf slave shackled and wearing an iron mask. To him, the virtues of the elf race are the perfect tools for his upcoming plans. While Burge Diaz continues to show off the dungeon, the mysterious villain has already begun calculating how to use these slaves to sow chaos. At the royal palace, King Hildren sighs in relief upon the arrival of the Guardian Knight. He believes that only he has the strength to salvage the situation. Kneeling with absolute loyalty, the Guardian Knight solemnly swears to rescue Princess Hilda from the enemy's grasp at any cost. The Guardian Knight's eyes burn with determination. An arduous journey to protect the kingdom and save Princess Hilda officially begins here. Burge Diaz hatches a dark scheme, secretly using an elf slave as a spy to sow chaos within the ranks of the heroes. The elf race is renowned for their noble virtues, making them the perfect choice for Burj Diaz's sinister plot. When asked about the type of slave he was looking for, Burj Diaz coldly replied with a single word, elf, leaving the man before him in shock. Noticing the man's hesitation, dark energy surged around Burj Diaz, threatening the person standing before him. Under immense pressure, the slave trader hastily offered gold to appease Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz ordered both of them to leave immediately, despite the slave trader's lingering fear regarding the danger of the imprisoned elf. Burj Diaz glanced at him with disdain, asserting that the money just provided was more than enough to cover any damages. As the iron cage door creaked open, Burj Diaz stepped closer to where the elf slave was being held. Burj Diaz spoke with sarcasm upon seeing someone of the noble elf race now reduced to a lowly slave. Sensing the ominous energy, the elf was startled to realize that Burj Diaz was, in fact, a demon. Without beating around the bush, Burj Diaz directly offered the elf a chance to take revenge on humanity. Even though the offer sounded tempting, the elf remained extremely cautious. The elf did not trust the words of a demon, claiming that Burj Diaz's promises were no more credible than those of humans. Burj Diaz asserted that he was no ordinary demon, promising to ensure the elf's safety and freedom after 50 years of service. Burj Diaz emphasized that 50 years is nothing compared to an elf's lifespan, surely better than living a life as a slave to humans. The elf countered by mentioning the world tree, the sacred entity that the elf race has always revered. The elf exposed the malicious intent of Burj Diaz's kind, those who constantly seek to destroy the world that the elves are protecting. With suspicion rising, the elf questioned how Burj Diaz could expect anyone to place trust in a demon. Burj Diaz offered a cryptic smile, accepting the elf's challenge. Burj Diaz swore upon the Demon King's code, vowing not to harm the world tree. As the oath was uttered, Burj Diaz affirmed that he would certainly fulfill every one of his promises. The elf was astonished by Burj Diaz's oath, for to the elves, the Demon King's code is as sacred as the world tree itself. Though he still felt Burj Diaz was a strange demon, the elf began to sense a hint of sincerity in those words. The elf introduced himself as Granada of the Wind Tree tribe. Granada set a condition: he would only swear loyalty after seeing for himself the Demon King who had sent Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz smiled confidently, asserting that Granada was looking at that very Demon King right now. Granada was stunned, unable to believe his ears at Burj Diaz's bold admission. Granada laughed mockingly, finding it ridiculous that a Demon King would appear in such a godforsaken place. Granada challenged Burj Diaz, declaring that if he were truly the Demon King, Granada would swear loyalty for 100 years. On the 5th floor of the tower, a tense confrontation was taking place between Burj Diaz and Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz sat on the throne, casually reminding Burj Diaz about the contract duration, leaving him shaken. Frustration exploded, and Burj Diaz screamed, feeling cheated by the deserted state of this tower. The first 3 floors were completely empty, without a single soul on guard. The 4th floor was nothing more than a botanical garden, with not a single monster to be found. Burj Diaz desperately thought that at this rate, revenge was nothing but a pipe dream. Burj Diaz believed the heroes would soon level this tower before the year ended, and he couldn't possibly keep working here anymore. Burj Diaz spoke up to interrupt, emphasizing that the contract was still valid while radiating terrifying demonic pressure. Sensing the overwhelming demonic power, Burj Diaz was shocked to realize that Burj Diaz was indeed a true Demon King. Although the tower's defenses were lax, the monsters of Urzist were not attacking them at all. Burj Diaz recalled those massive, powerful monsters, which left him filled with terror. With no other choice, Burj Diaz kneels down, swearing in the name of the World Tree to faithfully serve Burj Diaz for 100 years. Burj Diaz suspects that Burj Diaz coming to find him in person must surely be part of some grand scheme. Burj Diaz smiles and nonchalantly orders Burj Diaz to start by preparing dinner. Burj Diaz is left bewildered, unable to understand what is happening. While busy chopping vegetables, Burj Diaz still wonders what important role he plays in Burj Diaz's plans. Ernyan Hildren suddenly appears and offers to help make steamed dumplings, leaving Burj Diaz astonished. In the dining hall on the 5th floor of the tower, everyone sits down at the banquet table. Burj Diaz whispers to Burj Diaz, asking about the identity of the girl sitting at the table. Burj Diaz calmly introduces her as Ernyan Hildren, the princess of the Hildren kingdom. Burj Diaz nearly loses his mind, unable to believe that Burj Diaz would dare to kidnap a princess. Burj Diaz shouts that the tower is empty and asks how they could possibly withstand the wave of heroes about to descend upon them. Burj Diaz nonchalantly feeds Burj Diaz, asserting that this is exactly why he was hired. Burj Diaz praises Burj Diaz's cooking skills, while Ernyan Hildren proudly recounts her own contributions, leaving Burj Diaz completely confused. On the 4th floor of the tower, an important discussion begins. Burj Diaz denies that Burj Diaz has to fight the heroes because if they reach this point he would have no chance of survival. Burj Diaz orders Burj Diaz to sow chaos among humanity, making him realize he is to act as a spy. Burj Diaz demands to test Burj Diaz's true strength before assigning him the task. Burj Diaz promises to reduce the contract duration to 50 years if Burj Diaz wins this duel. Burj Diaz is fired up, determined to defeat Burj Diaz in this battle. The battle erupts as Burj Diaz launches a powerful attack, forcing Burj Diaz to struggle to defend himself. Burj Diaz mocks Burj Diaz's unexpected agility, questioning if he absorbed mana from the 4th floor to boost his power. Burj Diaz roars in anger, asserting that a normal elf cannot possess such formidable combat skills. Magical vines suddenly emerge from the ground, locking Burj Diaz's feet in place. Burj Diaz's eyes flash with a cold light, showing no signs of flinching in the face of this attack. Burj Diaz wears an enigmatic smile. He recognizes the immense potential in Burj Diaz and begins to make an offer. Burj Diaz is extremely shocked. He seems unable to believe what is happening right before his eyes. Burj Diaz firmly asserts that he will not use dark magic to finish off Burj Diaz. Cold declaration leaves Burj Diaz stunned, able only to gasp in despair. A massive explosion shakes the entire tower amidst the frozen landscape. At the headquarters of the Crimson Hawk Mercenary Guild, the atmosphere becomes more tense than ever. Mercenary leader greets an acquaintance with a calculating look on his face. Burj Diaz requests to hire the guild for 1 year, while the mercenaries nearby grumble about the beatings they previously suffered. A heavy bag of gold coins is dropped, leaving the entire room stunned. Swayed by the power of money, the loyalty of the mercenaries quickly shifts to support Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz demands that the mercenary leader accept a new member into the guild and allow Burj Diaz to relay orders. A man with a face full of scars introduces himself as Granada. The mercenaries look at each other with confused and anxious expressions. Tears begin to fall on the faces of those who were just beaten to a pulp. Under the glistening light, the group of mercenaries gathers together. Burj Diaz values the capabilities of this mercenary group, believing them to be easy to control. In his mind, Burj Diaz identified the only hero capable of answering Ernyan Hildren's call. Burj Diaz officially ordered the Crimson Hawk Guild to begin their first mission. In a stern tone, Burj Diaz demanded that they gather information as quickly as possible. At Burj Diaz's tower, a new plan is being devised to consolidate his power. Burj Diaz focuses intensely, turning his attention to his next objective to increase his strength. Demonic energy could be used to reinforce the tower or Burj Diaz himself. However, having sold off all his points, Burj Diaz is forced to find another way. That is spirit herbs. Spirit herbs absorb natural mana and crystallize it into pure energy blocks, granting immense power to anyone who consumes them. Due to violent storms and terrifying monsters, humans rarely set foot in the Urzest mountain range. Consequently, the spirit herbs have had a long time to accumulate mana. They refine natural energy into incredibly pure forms, turning the Urzest mountains into a giant treasure trove of spirit herbs. Although they cannot compare to demonic energy, this is the best option for now. Burj Diaz decides to set out in search of the spirit herbs. Gordon Dyrek, Burj Diaz's assistant, warns that leaving without careful preparation is like looking for a needle in a haystack, especially with monsters constantly lurking. Burj Diaz brushes off the concern about monsters, but agrees that finding the herbs won't be easy unless they have a top-tier mana detection device. Just then, a knock at the door surprises both Burj Diaz and Gordon Dyrek. Ernyan peeks through the door, softly asking if Burj Diaz is busy. The unexpected appearance of Ernyan leaves Burj Diaz and Gordon Dyrek stunned. Ernyan excitedly boasts about her thrill, having been bored to death with her daily life. Ernyan recalls the promise that she could decorate the 4th floor as she pleased, as a condition for her joining the trip. Burj Diaz agrees, though he wonders what other schemes Ernyan has in mind for wanting to turn this place into a natural garden. Ernyan naively thinks she has been locked in the tower, and this is her chance to escape. Ernyan is incredibly excited as she decides to head to the upper floor, believing this is the perfect moment. Ernyan curiously touches Burj Diaz, wondering what his next move will be. Burj Diaz doesn't hesitate, he grabs Ernyan and tells her to hold on tight. Both of them soar into the air at terrifying speed, leaving behind Ernyan's shrill scream. Ernyan frowns in annoyance at being forced into this high-speed flight. Ernyan maintains a displeased expression, her eyes glancing around. When she sees the world below, Ernyan cannot help but gasp in amazement. Ernyan is overwhelmed by the vastness of the world, something she had never imagined. The sky glows like fire, scorching the horizon and revealing a majestic landscape never seen before. Ernyan recalls her dull old life of endless magic training and studies. Ernyan proudly declares herself the first person to glide over the Urzest mountains, which Burj Diaz hardly cares about as he only wants her to focus on the mission. Ernyan demands that Burj Diaz call her by the name Ernyan, assuming they will be together for a long time. Burj Diaz warns Ernyan not to forget her place lest she be thrown into the dungeon, forcing her to obediently use her soul to search for the spirit herbs. Burj Diaz commands the magic spirit to charge forward, clearing a path through the snow-filled expanse. Burj Diaz muses that searching in this vast land is quite a challenge, but he trusts the mana spirit more than he trusts people like Gordon Dyrek. Suddenly, the spirits find the target, causing Burj Diaz and Ernyan to stop. Before them, a radiant spirit herb shines in the middle of the barren land. Light from the spirit herb attracts the attention of those lurking nearby. A pack of aggressive monsters approaches. They cannot hide their regret seeing the spirit herb found by Burj Diaz and Ernyan first. Burj Diaz stands tall, ordering the monsters to submit to his authority. Burj Diaz coldly delivers an ultimatum, demanding the monsters leave the spirit herb and depart in peace. The offer is flatly rejected. The monsters roar, determined not to submit to Burj Diaz. Hostility surges as they declare they will destroy Burj Diaz right here. Burj Diaz smirked with a dangerous glint in his eye. He realized that Gordon Dyrek was right about the true nature of these creatures. The frenzied monsters charged recklessly, determined to tear Burj Diaz apart and devour him. Without hesitation, Burj Diaz focused his dark energy into the palms of his hands. A terrifying surge of power erupted, obliterating everything in Burj Diaz's path. The overwhelming power caught the monsters completely off guard, leaving them defenseless against Burj Diaz. Cries of agony echoed through the air as the monsters were crushed by the sheer might of Burj Diaz. Amidst the chaos, Ernyan stood stunned, witnessing the raw power unleashed by Burj Diaz. Unmoved, Burj Diaz continued to channel his energy, maintaining crushing pressure on his foes. The catastrophic impact created powerful shockwaves, causing the very ground to tremble violently around Burj Diaz. Ernyan wondered in awe. Even though these monsters were notorious as fearsome hunters, they couldn't even take a single step toward Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz coldly surveyed the results. This was the power he commanded. The power of Burj Diaz truly transcended all imagination. Magical phantom manifestations from Burj Diaz tore through the sky, finishing off anyone standing in his way. As the smoke and dust cleared, only Burj Diaz and Ernyan remained standing in the middle of the desolate wasteland. Ernyan couldn't help but marvel at the purity of the spirit herb she had just collected. Burj Diaz warned her sternly, forbidding Ernyan from even thinking about keeping it for herself. Burj Diaz promised Ernyan a reward if she found more spirit herbs, which instantly piqued her excitement. Ernyan searched diligently until she was utterly exhausted in the biting cold of the night. However, luck was not on her side. Ernyan could not find any more spirit herbs. In the heart of the icy mountains, the tower of Burj Diaz loomed, a place harboring the darkest of secrets. Burj Diaz wore a knowing smile, holding a glowing magic lotus. He saw the kidnapping of the princess as the perfect strategic chess move. The little princess was sleeping soundly among the spirits, completely unaware that she had become a vital piece on Burj Diaz's chessboard. Gordon Dyrek delivered an urgent report about the news from Granada, leaving Burj Diaz stunned by the enemy's speed. An army of 32 heroes was marching aggressively toward Urzist. Burj Diaz coldly deduced that this group would certainly recruit more members and complete side quests along the way to bolster their power. Gordon Dyrek presented various countermeasures, while Burj Diaz maintained his terrifyingly calm composure. As lines of magical code flickered by, Burj Diaz ordered Gordon Dyrek to take his time and read through all those plans. Without a hint of hesitation, Burj Diaz deleted every proposal, leaving Gordon Dyrek in a state of shock. Burj Diaz declared he would neither interfere nor send monsters to block them, a maddening decision that made Gordon Dyrek gasp in disbelief. Burj Diaz reasoned that trying to stop them would only make the heroes stronger, so he ordered Gordon Dyrek to send a message to Granada to infiltrate and gain their trust. Gordon Dyrek worried about violating the rules, but Burj Diaz confidently pledged to fortify the tower instead. When Burj Diaz announced his intention to use dwarves, Gordon Dyrek nearly lost control over the chaotic mess Burj Diaz was creating. Gordon Dyrek screamed in despair, claiming the tower would become a laughingstock for housing such a motley crew of creatures. Purple energy exploded around Burj Diaz's fist, and his cold gaze instantly silenced all resistance. Burj Diaz explained that he wasn't using the dwarves to fight, but for their masterful magical engineering. Burj Diaz painted a horrific scenario. What if the heroes expected weak monsters but were instead met with heavy artillery on the very first floor? Gordon Dyrek's eyes widened, completely shocked by Burj Diaz's ruthless plan. Gordon Dyrek had to admit that the heroes would certainly never see this surprise attack coming. Even so, Gordon Dyrek still trembled, fearing the consequences of breaking the ancient rules. Gordon Dyrek stood frozen before the empty chair, sensing the irreversible change taking hold of the tower. Gordon Dyrek rages, pulling at his hair in frustration, cursing Burj Diaz for the never-ending trouble. Deep underground, the dwarf city of Volfner echoes with the relentless sound of hammers striking iron. Sparks fly in every direction as the smith tirelessly crafts magical weapons. The greatest blacksmith of the dwarf race is in deep focus, pouring all his efforts into his masterpiece. Volfner, the underground city of the dwarves, where ancient secrets lie hidden deep beneath the earth. Although he encountered countless dwarves in his past life, this is the first time Fenrir has set foot in their city. Fenrir stops at an inn called the Midnight Inn, the starting point for his scheme. Without beating around the bush, Fenrir places gold coins on the table, inquiring about the most skilled blacksmith in the city. Fenrir's generosity makes it impossible for the person across from him to refuse. The innkeeper chuckles, admitting that whether they are dwarves or heroes, no one can resist the allure of gold. Fenrir is directed to the city center, where a colossal pit and a highly secured elevator system await. The iron door closes, signaling that the journey deep into the earth has begun. The roar of the engine echoes thunderously in the confined space. Following the instructions, Fenrir heads straight to the lowest level, where the deepest chamber of the city is located. The elevator door opens, revealing a man deeply focused on his craft. The sound of the hammer hitting the anvil rings out incessantly, drowning out all other noises. Before Fenrir stands none other than Lodger Friedrich, the legendary blacksmith toiling away at his work. Lodger Friedrich's forging technique is truly astonishing, as if magic itself were dancing with every strike of his hammer. Without hesitation, Fenrir decides to initiate his plan to kidnap Lodger Friedrich right then and there. Just as Fenrir approaches, a sudden, fierce burst of firepower erupts. Lodger Friedrich had already sensed the traces of demonic energy coming from Fenrir. Fenrir cannot help but be surprised by Lodger Friedrich's reaction. A powerful strike from Lodger Friedrich's hammer crashes down, creating a massive tremor. Lodger Friedrich narrows his eyes, realizing the person before him is a hero. Lodger Friedrich proudly declares his identity, the one who imbues weapons with heroic power. Fenrir scoffs, mocking Lodger Friedrich's weakness and denying the hero title. Fenrir coldly asserts his true identity as the Demon King. Lodger Friedrich's hammer falls to the ground with a deafening clang. Dwarven guards immediately swarm in, fearing for Lodger Friedrich's safety. Dust and smoke obscure the smithy. Fenrir quickly captures Lodger Friedrich and retreats into the shadows. Closing in, Fenrir orders Lodger Friedrich to stay silent if he values his life. Lodger Friedrich trembles as he asks about Fenrir's purpose for infiltrating Volfner. Fenrir states he has no interest in Louisburft, what he needs are the secret tunnels. Lodger Friedrich cowers, sweat pouring down his face. He trembles, wondering if Fenrir is truly targeting Louisburft. Fear consumes Lodger Friedrich. He curses his misfortune, as a man who only wanted a quiet life is now forced to face the Demon King. System window appears with a cold message: Dwarf hero Lodger Friedrich. Trait, weak, a harsh reality that makes Lodger Friedrich want to collapse. Fenrir wears a sinister smile. He makes no effort to hide his dark intentions as he forces Lodger Friedrich to choose between kidnapping Louisburft or death. Lodger Friedrich roars in despair. He cannot believe Fenrir would make such a cruel demand. Fenrir threatens to spread rumors that Lodger Friedrich is a coward, willing to betray Louisburft to save his own skin. Fenrir smirks, awaiting the hero's breakdown. Lodger Friedrich is in a state of absolute panic. His honor is all he has left, and Fenrir is ruthlessly stripping it away. Visions of eternal torture flash through Lodger Friedrich's mind. He knows that if his reputation is destroyed, his life is effectively over. Fenrir loses his patience. He issues an ultimatum, forcing Lodger Friedrich to make a decision immediately. Faced with the threat, Lodger Friedrich trembles and agrees. Fenrir swears on his name as the Demon King to ensure his safety. Lodger Friedrich knows the Demon King's laws all too well. That oath is absolute, no one dares to betray it. With no way out, Lodger Friedrich grits his teeth, accepting his fate as he prepares to lead Fenrir down the secret path. Lodger Friedrich leads the way reluctantly, yet his eyes remain filled with anxiety as Fenrir eyes him with suspicion. Inside Lodger Friedrich's forge, the air hangs heavy and empty. The legendary blacksmith has vanished without a trace. Louisburft's eyes widen in shock. She cannot believe what she is witnessing. The name Lodger Friedrich spills from Louisburft's lips, laced with deep concern. Louisburft stands there, radiating authority yet unable to hide her confusion. She wonders where Lodger Friedrich could have gone while her weapon remains unfinished. Louisburft roars in fury. She refuses to accept that a hero like Lodger Friedrich could be kidnapped so easily. A subordinate steps forward to explain that despite his hero status, Lodger Friedrich is, in the end, just a blacksmith with limited combat prowess. Louisburft cuts him off, ordering an immediate search to find those who dared to kidnap Lodger Friedrich. Under Louisburft's command, the army swings into action. They must bring Lodger Friedrich back at any cost. Louisburft clenches her fists, her eyes burning with rage. She vows that if they fail, everyone will pay with their heads. Deep within the secret tunnel, Lodger Friedrich leads the way for Fenrir. A flickering light illuminates the dark passage. Lodger Friedrich struggles to move through the narrow tunnel, his clumsy movements visibly irritating Fenrir. Fenrir snaps at Lodger Friedrich for his sluggish pace, while the blacksmith can only offer excuses about the narrowness of the tunnel. Finally, Lodger Friedrich and Fenrir reach the secret entrance to the castle. An ancient architectural structure emerges from the heart of the cave. Loger Friedrich collapses, utterly exhausted. Fenrir stands there, coldly observing his handiwork. Loger Friedrich declares his mission complete and demands Fenrir handle the rest before hastily retreating. Loger Friedrich is in a state of absolute panic, screaming about his oath of protection, but is met only with cold contempt. The Demon King doesn't care for such archaic rules. He bluntly calls Loger Friedrich a useless wretch. Loger Friedrich completely breaks down, collapsing before the other's cruelty. Demon King extends a hand wreathed in dark aura. Loger Friedrich lies on the ground, regretting not turning over Luai's birth sooner. In his desperation, Loger Friedrich scrambles to showcase his worth, insisting his weaponsmithing skills are peerless. Loger Friedrich doesn't hesitate to humble himself, begging the Demon King to utilize his skills in any way possible. In exchange for his life, Loger Friedrich offers to become a spy for the Demon King within Volfner. Seeing Loger Friedrich's intense sincerity, the Demon King agrees to spare him, causing Loger Friedrich to bow and offer frantic thanks. But deep down, Loger Friedrich still harbors intentions of betrayal, swearing to take revenge the moment he gets the chance. Loger Friedrich vows to make the Demon King regret sparing his life for eternity. With a manic smile, Loger Friedrich challenges the Demon King, bracing for a brutal act of vengeance. Loger Friedrich is lost in his delusions, completely unaware that he has been transported somewhere entirely different. On the fourth floor of the Burj Tower, Loger Friedrich is shocked to realize he is standing before the Demon King, alongside Luai's birth. Fenrir cannot believe his eyes, seeing the Demon King recruiting Loger Friedrich. Fenrir screams in confusion, while Loger Friedrich can only stand frozen before the Demon King. When asked about taking in Loger Friedrich, the Demon King simply replies, ordering his subordinates to drop the matter. Luai's birth watches with curiosity, wondering if the Demon King truly poses a threat. Loger Friedrich, still in shock, repeatedly questions the Demon King about why he is here. The Demon King coldly admits he knocked Loger Friedrich unconscious to prevent him from pulling any tricks on the way. Loger Friedrich bursts into manic laughter, unclear whether it's out of fear or a total loss of sanity. Loger Friedrich's laughter echoes throughout the space, a madness beyond description. The Demon King eyes Loger Friedrich with scrutiny, failing to understand why he is acting so hysterically. Loger Friedrich claims he is extremely happy, a clumsy life filled with fear. Demon King is satisfied with Loger Friedrich's attitude and begins to assign him his first mission. The Demon King orders Loger Friedrich to forge cannons capable of wiping out all the heroes. The Hero Expedition's forward base, where every dark conspiracy begins to take root. Rumors spread among the heroes that Friedrich now possesses black flames, forcing them to scramble for fire-resistant gear. Friedrich observes a hero's reflection on a magical device, realizing their morale has not yet wavered. Burj Diaz coldly asserts that they are destined for failure, with neither glory nor spoils awaiting them. Burj Diaz smiles critically, believing that growing frustration will soon leave them dead in their tracks. Burj Diaz orders Friedrich to keep a close watch, as this is a long-term tactical chess match. Friedrich understands Burj Diaz's plan. Withholding the monsters is a lethal blow, grinding down the hero's patience. Friedrich walks into the hall, wondering if there has ever been a Friedrich as deep and unpredictable as this. Footsteps echo, and Friedrich secretly feels relieved not to be facing such a dangerous individual head-on. Burj Diaz issues a strict demand: no mana stones are to be used, and in return, the first floor of the labyrinth will be entirely under Friedrich's control. Friedrich breaks into a cold sweat, worried that an outdated trap without mana stones will be useless against such sharp-witted heroes. Burj Diaz coldly forces Friedrich to ensure that the trap remains effective at all costs. Burj Diaz explains that because the heroes are favored by the world, their ability to sense energy is incredibly acute. Burj Diaz threatens Friedrich, stating that if he isn't the master blacksmith he claims to be, his head will soon be replaced. Friedrich panics and brags about the self-made magical device he has been working on for 3 years, capable of completely concealing mana trails. Burj Diaz sneers dangerously, never ceasing to doubt Friedrich's true capabilities. Burj Diaz decides to trust Friedrich this time, but immediately activates a mechanism that leaves Friedrich in terror. Burj Diaz explains that this is a device to detach the head from the body. A single snap of his fingers would end everything. Burj Diaz warns Friedrich that this device also conceals his face, and removing it will be considered an attempt to flee. Burj Diaz outlines a cautious route through the kingdoms to gather rare materials for the towers and cannons. After a month of dedicated work, Burj Diaz has collected all the materials and stored them in his pocket dimension. Burj Diaz returns to Volfner, where Friedrich is waiting with unfinished crafting projects. A dry crackling sound resonates. Friedrich is pouring his heart and soul into his meticulous engineering work. The princess flies into a rage because a month and a half have passed and her subordinates have yet to find a trace of the kidnapper. Soldiers report that the blacksmiths have dug so many tunnels that tracking the enemy has become extremely difficult. The princess mocks her useless subordinates, asserting that the kidnapper must have escaped long ago. The princess issues an ultimatum: if the kidnapper is not found within 2 weeks, all her subordinates will pay with their lives. The princess screams in anger, ordering the troops to immediately seal off every suspicious tunnel. The princess stands amidst the ruins of the labyrinth, panting with fury at her subordinates' incompetence. Friedrich looks down at Friedrich's unfinished weapon, her eyes filled with regret for a creation that will never take shape. Friedrich clenches her fists, her eyes burning with rage, as she roars a threatening demand for Friedrich to stay alive to finish what he started. A strange noise echoes from the tunnel. Friedrich spins around, catching the panicked look of Friedrich hiding beneath. Friedrich narrows her eyes, her full attention fixed on the Friedrich who was just discovered. Friedrich trembles, trying to keep his identity hidden from Friedrich's interrogation. Friedrich coldly speaks up, exposing the secret of Friedrich's underground passage. The atmosphere becomes extremely tense as Friedrich calls Friedrich by name, forcing him to show himself. Friedrich breaks out in a cold sweat, stuttering incoherently in the face of Friedrich's overwhelming presence. Friedrich breaks into a sinister smile, her golden armored hands making a deadly crackling sound. Still wearing that terrifying smile, Friedrich interrogates Friedrich about why he dared to run away. Friedrich yells in desperation, trying to explain that it was all a terrible misunderstanding with Friedrich. Friedrich stomped on the floor, the explosive power leaving Friedrich terrified, and she declared that he would be her slave from this moment on. But before starting the work, Friedrich asserted that Friedrich must receive a proper punishment for daring to escape. A deafening collision erupted between Friedrich and the newcomer, shaking the entire space. Magical power exploded violently, blasting everything around them in a blinding flash of purple light. Friedrich roared with intimidation, her fiery eyes searching for Burge Diaz, who had just interrupted her fun. A firm, decisive footstep echoed as Burge Diaz appeared, immediately drawing Friedrich's attention. Burge Diaz appeared, ordering Friedrich to take the device while he prepared himself to face Friedrich. Friedrich was furious, screaming as she demanded to know from Burge Diaz why he was helping Friedrich. Ignoring Friedrich's rage, Burge Diaz completely disregarded her, asserting that Friedrich was his slave. Friedrich screamed in a frenzy, launching a preemptive strike straight at Burge Diaz to protect her item. Burge Diaz easily blocked Friedrich's attack, the sound of the impact ringing out harshly. Burge Diaz's gaze turned cold, focusing intensely on every one of Friedrich's movements. Without hesitation, Burge Diaz unleashed a powerful counterattack, completely overpowering Friedrich. Friedrich stood stunned, unable to believe the power of the Burge Diaz standing before her. Burge Diaz observed coldly, his composure only making Friedrich even more enraged. A loud noise echoed as Friedrich and Burge Diaz continued their clash. Burge Diaz was knocked back but held his ground, while Friedrich continued to pressure him with blazing magic. Burge Diaz turned and unleashed a mighty strike, ready to end the confrontation with Friedrich. Friedrich was suddenly grabbed by the top of her head by Burge Diaz, and the situation became dire. Rapid, consecutive attacks rained down, creating powerful shockwaves throughout the space. Burge Diaz closed the distance quickly, landing a powerful blow that left Friedrich unable to react. Burge Diaz's opponent was none other than the princess, possessing formidable physical strength. In his past life memories, the princess was once one of the most powerful entities in Arian, far exceeding her current strength. Burge Diaz pondered deeply whether this was the once-in-a-lifetime chance to finish off the princess before she became too strong. Burge Diaz knew that would require mobilizing all of his true magical power and strength. Burge Diaz realized he was no longer at his peak like in his past life. If his identity were revealed, he would certainly be surrounded by soldiers. Meanwhile, Friedrich was struggling to endure the relentless attacks, sweating under the immense pressure. Burge Diaz urged frantically, asking Friedrich about the important device he needed. The Mana Phantom, a giant creation made by Friedrich, was silently working to mask the magical signatures. Friedrich coldly issued a threat, giving Burge Diaz exactly 1 minute to complete the task. Friedrich roared in resentment, claiming she wouldn't hesitate to abandon Burge Diaz if the situation required it. Friedrich replied in a panic, trying to finish the work as quickly as possible under Friedrich's pressure. Burge Diaz told himself he wasn't sure how long he could hold out without using his full power. A horrific energy explosion occurred as both sides collided, causing the ground to shake violently. The princess screamed with murderous intent, declaring the end of her enemy's life and threatening to break Friedrich's legs. Burge Diaz smirked, mocking the princess's title and demanding to seize the device from Friedrich. The machinery screeched loudly, and the pipes began to overload. Friedrich reported that the work was finished, and a burst of energy erupted from his position. The princess was furious, unable to believe that Friedrich had returned just to take that thing. Burge Diaz seized the opportunity as soon as an opening appeared. Burge Diaz unleashed a thunderous kick directly at the princess, sending her flying. The impact triggered a violent explosion, shattering the floor where the princess had been standing. Burge Diaz activated his pocket dimension and ordered Friedrich to leave the area immediately. The princess shrieked, refusing to accept that she had been halted by that last attack. The central engine shuddered, signaling that a major shift was about to occur. The princess berated her subordinates for their incompetence while she was facing danger. Princess ordered her soldiers to pursue Friedrich into the newly opened tunnel. Gazing at the sealed door, the princess was stunned to realize how much Friedrich detested forging weapons for her. Friedrich gritted his teeth, a mocking smirk plastered on his face as he sarcastically remarked on how interesting the situation had become. Unfazed, Friedrich growled that she would hunt down Burj Diaz herself, even if it meant turning the entire continent upside down to make him pay. With eyes burning with killing intent, Friedrich hissed a final, chilling threat, forcing Burj Diaz to await his inevitable demise. The heavy sound of iron chains striking the floor echoes throughout the silent space, sending a shockwave through the room. On the first floor of the tower, Burj Diaz, the princess, and Kruta stand before a colossal magic device that is beginning to power up. The princess cannot hide her astonishment at the massive scale of the device, while Burj Diaz calmly asserts that this is the key weapon to stop the heroes. After Kruta reports that the installation is complete, Burj Diaz coldly orders him to activate the device immediately. Without a hint of hesitation, Burj Diaz responds with absolute confidence regarding his plan. Burj Diaz muses, fully aware that the price for acquiring this magical technology is incredibly steep. The magic device begins to whirl, releasing brilliant beams of azure light. The energy burst is so overwhelming that everyone present is forced to cover their eyes. Blinding white light engulfs the entire surrounding area. The system displays a prompt requiring confirmation to spend 10,000 points to finalize the synchronization process. Burj Diaz is stunned to realize that synchronizing with the tower is actually possible. Determined to grasp this secret, Burj Diaz orders the synchronization to proceed, causing a massive amount of his points to be deducted instantly. The system announces that Burj Diaz has officially become the new master, simultaneously converting all energy sources into dark magic power. Kruta cannot help but be shocked by the unexpected transformation, while Burj Diaz maintains a calm, icy expression. Burj Diaz allows the princess to use her magic freely to test the newly acquired power. The princess manifests a gigantic magic orb, causing Kruta to panic, fearing that the facility they just tidied up will be destroyed. Burj Diaz observes that the amount of released magic power is too great and risks being detected by outside forces. He steps outside the tower, the sound of Burj Diaz's footsteps ringing out rhythmically against the frozen snow. A flicker of doubt begins to surface in Burj Diaz's mind. Standing before the massive gate, Burj Diaz surveys the entire area around the tower. Burj Diaz is stunned to realize he cannot detect any magic power, a testament to the true strength of this device. Tests his control, placing his hand on the cold snow to channel energy into the ground. The energy flow begins to shake violently under Burj Diaz's command. A powerful gust of wind sweeps through, swirling the white snowflakes. Burj Diaz is amazed by the results of his own experiment. Suddenly, the tower vanishes from sight, leaving Burj Diaz alone in the vast, empty space. Burj Diaz continues to manipulate the energy, focusing his entire mind on the hand radiating dark aura. The tower abruptly reappears, surrounded by powerful surges of energy. Burj Diaz understands that he can hide the tower at will, even if the cost in energy points is substantial. Though he currently lacks the capacity for long-term maintenance, Burj Diaz smiles ambitiously, knowing this skill will become a powerful weapon in the future. Burj Diaz is deeply focused on his plan when Kruta screams, begging for permission to dismantle the tower and the magic device for research. Kruta points frantically at the giant device, while Burj Diaz watches him with an icy gaze, silently likening him to a demon hungry for slaughter. Burj Diaz sets a condition: if his cannons wipe out the heroes on the first floor, he will grant Kruta whatever he desires. Upon hearing his master's promise, Kruta leaps with joy, right next to the operating magic device. Burj Diaz turns to the princess, ordering her to deal with any hero who manages to reach the fourth floor, leaving her visibly shaken. The princess points at herself in shock, but Burj Diaz immediately shuts down her resistance, reminding her of her status as an unparalleled spirit mage and that there is no turning back to the palace. Burj Diaz muses to himself, wondering if he is pushing the princess too hard. Burj Diaz notes that the princess has always lived in luxury, and forcing her to betray her own kind is no small challenge. Burj Diaz reassures the princess that if she simply appears and disrupts the enemy's formation, he will grant her another request. The princess agrees to the deal but sets a personal condition: she does not want to be introduced as a princess. Burj Diaz agreed immediately, dismissing it as an incredibly simple request. Princess winked confidently, wondering if she should use her beauty to carry out this mission. In the vast space, Burj Diaz sat upon his throne, focusing on manipulating the magical data panels to prepare for the upcoming battle. Burj Diaz finalized the plan, used the magical cannons on the first floor to deplete the enemy troops, then used the princess as bait on the fourth floor. However, Burj Diaz remained concerned that his current forces would not be enough to wipe out the more than 200 heroes approaching. Burj Diaz summoned a spiritual herb tainted with demonic energy, an item capable of significantly boosting his strength. Burj Diaz decided he must go and gather more spiritual herbs corrupted by demonic energy to use as weapons against the hero faction. Amidst the freezing snowy mountains, the Black Tower loomed menacingly. Burj Diaz and the princess stood in the middle of the snowy field, frustrated at finding no trace of the spiritual herbs in this area. Burj Diaz grew angry that the useless spirits had botched the task, while the princess noticed something unusual. A giant with sharp claws approached, making the ground shake with every step. It was the frost beast, charging toward them with a ferocious look on its face. Burj Diaz prepared magic in his palm, looking weary at having to deal with these wild beasts. The frost beast stomped hard on the snow, creating a massive tremor. The frost beast knelt, respectfully greeting Burj Diaz with the title of Demon King. Burj Diaz raised his hand, radiating dark demonic energy as the frost beast begged to become his loyal servant. Under the princess's gaze, Burj Diaz stood like an overlord, in complete control of the frost beast kneeling at his feet. Burj Diaz narrowed his eyes in suspicion, questioning the idea of accepting the frost beast as a subordinate. Burj Diaz narrowed his eyes in suspicion, questioning the idea of accepting the frost beast as a subordinate. Before Burj Diaz, Krutu and his pack of frost beasts knelt in the cold snow, desperately pleading for mercy. Burj Diaz remained unmoved. He saw through Krutu's heart, exposing his ambition to leverage his power to grow stronger. Caught in the act, Krutu did not flinch. He signaled his subordinates to bring forth the offering for negotiation. The ancient chest opened, revealing radiant spiritual flowers, a rare treasure Krutu used to barter for his loyalty. The princess was amazed by the treasure, while Burj Diaz silently admired Krutu's cunning. Burj Diaz continued to twist the knife into Krutu's weakness, forcing him to admit his tribe's lack of strength. Without a word of protest, Krutu bowed his head reverently, accepting any judgment from Burj Diaz. A smirk appeared on Burj Diaz's face. He had completely taken control of the situation. Burj Diaz activated a magic circle, officially accepting Krutu as a servant under his command. A surge of violent magical power enveloped Krutu, marking the binding contract between master and servant. Burj Diaz ordered Krutu to expand the tribe's influence across this frozen land. The glowing red magic contract was carved deep into Krutu's body, a mark that could not be denied. Burj Diaz promised a great reward awaiting Krutu if he fulfilled his duties well. Krutu vowed to ensure the survival of his tribe and become a powerful right-hand man for Burj Diaz. Krutu expressed his deep gratitude, while Burj Diaz and the princess watched in silence. The oath of loyalty echoed, as Krutu pledged to serve Burj Diaz until his final breath. The entire pack of Krutu unanimously affirmed their absolute loyalty before Burj Diaz. Back at the tower, all of Burj Diaz's resources were ready for the dark lands ahead. Outside the tower, Krutu's army had fully gathered, awaiting the order to strike. On the first floor, the magic cannons were fully charged and ready to fire. On the fourth floor, the magical entities were standing by. Burj Diaz sits on his throne, watching with satisfaction as the pieces are set into place. Burj Diaz bellows for his subordinates. The time for revenge has finally arrived. Gaze of Burj Diaz burns with hatred. He has waited far too long for this very moment. The snow-covered forests remain silent, concealing the presence of those who are closing in. The vanguard has finally reached their destination. Erzest mountain range rises majestically before them, hiding the tower of Burj Diaz within its depths. The treacherous, rugged terrain will soon bear witness to the fateful confrontation ahead. The army marches forward, their silhouettes resolute as they head toward the Tower of Destiny. Taikan Siu Tien Phuong Hoten Wok Bong Toi Ba Trom Layan Hung Feo Dai Tin Lang Dan Dao Su Koi Dao Kwa Emoti Ching and Vien Chin John Ko. Ben Trong Dai San Xe Hoa Emoti Bua Tik Lin Din Dang Dianare Tien Koi Vang Doi Lap Kong John In Oi Kak On Hung Hoi Tu. Burj Diaz Kung Kak Dong Min Dang Dam Min Trong Bao Kong Kai Han Hoing Enoy In Hum Loi Tan Diang Duok Treo Doi De Trin Trong. Burj Diaz Ngoi Du Lang Le Quan Sat Bua Ti Trong Kai Thursday Hut Sucha Wai Quan Hung 6 Kok Sung Quan. Mot 6 Kok Fan Kich Dung Day Ho Vang Yu Kom Wan Nuoi Chu Wai Den By Fat Yu Kwa Burj Diaz. On Den Chung Ruk Ro Chu Sang In Hung Wang Mat Day Kio Han Kwa In Hung Nu In Am Ju Vai Tiaro Chu Cha Trong Chi In Vien Chin. Burj Diaz Hang Jong Hung Wan Mat Vi Fiam In Truakai Bat Dao By Dien Van Quan Trong. Burj Diaz Dung Tang Nuoi Kat Tiang Goi and Hung Nuoi Dong Doi and Hung Nuoi De Sat Kan Kung On Den Tan Kung Kwa Su Kien Nan. Tiang Koi Vang Vong Kap Kan Fong Kai Burj Diaz Che Jasu and Nat Kwa Ma Vong Patam Chi Kong Dam Siu Emoticon Kavat Nauer Chan Duong Ho. I Ru Vang Du Trong Te Burj Diaz Ki Run Lin Nu Fan Chiu Kwai Tom Sata Muon Lay Dao Ma Vong Kwa On. Mob Loi the Long Trong Duok Thatare Kang Din Suc Man Va 6 the Kwa Ho Truok Thursday Kong Doi Troi Chung. Burj Diaz Gam Len De Kai the Yakin Ca Dai San Rung Chi and Trong Su Quang Hyatt. Jua Tian Gam Sam Set Mod Bien Kante Vuan Len Chao Dong Tan Ho Vang Dan Nia Quad Song Il Y. Burj Diaz lang laquan sat dam dong, suing gam vi and hung du don qua ma von. Utan song qua doi quan on hung nai du mang dao and dam net tu and hung nuak di day tin ton qua Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz kong tu Thursday don now tu vi tau tung kak bang hoi thuang nan cho den vi kipi byuk and hung kuko white and down gafai tuan len. Burj Diaz tu hoi lu toa thap du ko tuk su trong rong valude ko fi la ko hoi de Burj Diaz fan boi ho hei kong. Ong nin jiat min Burj Diaz get bo sui gi du di. On beat min kan su tu du sao kai chuyen vien chin nai ketuk. Tu tran and ban then Burj Diaz quiet din de den lup out sao tin hin cho ma vong. On trang lan leo chiu sang ban song noi Burj Diaz dung emoti min. Burj Diaz non duok men len koi kung qua emoti thiet by ma thuet chi ti on cat ut moi lin lak sao kai roi di. Mob loiken bo vi su noyin qua tuet roi va en hung dem kong good duok truyen den Burj Diaz. Loinak no and yv vik fi ju kuan kech nai kai kan qua toa thap more. Burj Diaz sung so kai tin hu ma thoa trong te bong chok va tat. Nai lu du Burj Diaz bat ngos of hien fi asawan king Burj Diaz jiat ne min v kin gak. Burj Diaz dua cho Burj Diaz modly roi tre k modcu chi than tien and hun de guan ep. Burj Diaz du hoi vi and hun loo qua Burj Diaz luan kotuk su tin veo chien tang koi kung qua ho hei kong. On mat qua Burj Diaz fan chiu trong ru de lo mot kem jiak bat in kong de che jiao. Burj Diaz Thursday nan rang vik da kich veo toa thap qua ma vong chin la dian gutranjan and oi chan ko du jia la de don. Burj Diaz mim koi nak lai cho Burj Diaz vi chien tang truok wong ma vong hai vong chang duong sat hoi kung siswan sinu ve. Burj Diaz dot nga chat en vi chien song dan by duk vong ma vong king Burj Diaz kun lai. Burj Diaz koi lan tuk juk Burj Diaz hei chia se lai ka chuyen on hung du. Burj Diaz im lang doi mathoang hien lin su tram tu. Burj Diaz kim tun tra loi rang chien tang du chico the dat duok no in hung nuoi dong doi dung cam nu Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz de gi dan dao doi tien fong de yamoduong dung moi no Burj Diaz yem tiero tu fiasao. Burj Diaz gat dao don y voi de gi qua Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz koak vi Burj Diaz kai ca hai kung bupe o bentron lao dai. Burj Diaz leak nin Burj Diaz voi emoti on mat day and y. Burj Diaz kang din du chin la suc man qua su don ket roi dat nim tin qua min veo Burj Diaz. Ot ben min moi lai rang tren ti tran noi han trin van dang ti dien. The army cheered in unison with Burj Diaz leading the ranks. The group advanced toward Erzist Gorge, a cold and desolate ravine. The wind howled through the narrow mountain pass as the army pushed forward. The soldiers felt a sense of relief, grateful that the weather wasn't as harsh as expected. They laughed and joked, confident that the monsters here were currently hibernating. Suddenly, a drop of purple liquid landed on the head of one of the soldiers. The atmosphere turned tense as doubt began to creep in. The soldier stared in bewilderment at the strange substance on his hand. The battle officially began, and Burj Diaz braced himself for combat. Commands were issued immediately, and the soldiers snapped into position. As the monsters emerged, everyone started covering for one another. An ice giant appeared, sending a wave of terror through the entire group. The ice giant rose, revealing its menacing, skeletal form. Burj Diaz studied his foe, calculating how to strike back. Burj Diaz decided to engage the ice giant head-on. A surge of power was unleashed, cutting through the wind. Burj Diaz lunged straight toward the ice giant. The ice giant let out a thunderous roar. Burj Diaz flashed a confident smile, completely unfazed by the enemy. Burj Diaz unleashed a decisive blow against the ice giant. Terrifying impact shook the very ground beneath them. Moving like a bolt of lightning, Burj Diaz used the shockwave to close the distance to his target. The cliffside shattered, sending debris flying through the air. A heart-wrenching roar echoed as a wave of frigid magical energy engulfed Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz gripped his sword tightly, its blade glowing with an intense blue energy. His eyes widened as he seized the moment of the enemy's vulnerability. With a blade so sharp it tore through space, Burj Diaz delivered the finishing strike. There was no time to linger. Burj Diaz shouted for his comrades to retreat immediately. A massive explosion rocked the area, and the panicked army scrambled to flee the danger zone. A warrior screamed in desperation, pointing the way out through the narrow gap. The frigid air began to freeze everything in its path. Amidst the blinding blizzard, the survivors struggled to catch their breath. Exhausted, Burj Diaz and his men collapsed onto the frozen snow. They whispered about the horrors of this place, a land that could terrify even the bravest of warriors. All eyes turned toward Burj Diaz, whispering about his inhuman strength. Burj Diaz listened in silence, his face deep in thought. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his sharp gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Burj Diaz wore a confident smile, placing his full trust in the capabilities of his team. From above, the enemy watched every movement of the group below. Suspicion grew, the monsters would not give them even a second of rest. Burge Diaz senses a sinister surge of energy and warns his teammates about the enemy's presence. A mysterious entity appears, mocking the foolish heroes. Burge Diaz remains unflinching, bracing himself to face those blocking their path. A warning about white snow echoes in Burge Diaz's mind like an ominous omen. Burge Diaz is shocked, finally realizing the true meaning behind that warning. The enemy sneers, declaring that no one can ever surpass this tower. The individual's eyes are filled with cruelty, a grin plastered across their face in defiance. The ground shakes violently, a catastrophe is looming. Burge Diaz is filled with absolute terror, unable to believe what is unfolding before his eyes. A massive avalanche crashes down, burying everything in madness. Amidst the raging blizzard, Burge Diaz can only scream in despair. Burge Diaz's face tightens, his sheer terror etched into every feature as his pointed ears twitch under the suffocating pressure. Meanwhile, Burge Diaz sits nonchalantly on the throne, surrounded by system notification windows vibrating in sync with Burge Diaz's screams. Burge Diaz flashes an evil smile, mockingly welcoming the heroes who have just returned. Burge Diaz's gaze is icy, boring into Burge Diaz with a challenging question about how this death game has changed. Burge Diaz smirks with contempt, staring directly at the image of Burge Diaz screaming in the magic screen, clearly defining the roles of hunter and prey. Burge Diaz sits on his throne, surrounded by magical interface panels analyzing data. He is meticulously planning his next calculated moves. Burge Diaz's gaze is cold and sharp as he memorizes the first warning about the dangers of the snowy lands. Amidst a blinding snowstorm, the army falls into panic when an ogre triggers a terrifying avalanche, leaving many missing without a trace. Hillian Cagil roars in fury, ordering the entire army to set up camp right where they are to begin the search for their lost comrades. As night falls, the ogre and grotesque specters begin to stir, threatening anyone who dares to let their guard down. With a thunderous roar, the ogre and its minions appear. Hillian Cagil and his men are horrified to realize the beasts have brought even more monsters with them. Granada grinds his teeth in resentment. He cannot bear the misery of having to face the Demon King's power. Burge Diaz wears a sinister smile, seeing through the chaotic scene unfolding. He knows the decisive moment is approaching. Hillian Cagil pants heavily, his face showing clear signs of exhaustion after relentless battles in the bone-chilling cold. Hillian Cagil and his expeditionary force finally reach the mountain peak, but confusion fills them as their target is nowhere to be seen. On the desolate peak under the blue sky, Hillian Cagil blankly wonders where the Demon King's tower has vanished to. Hillian Cagil screams in despair, unable to believe that a massive tower could be so hard to find. Hillian Cagil looks at Hillian Cagil with a look of resignation, declaring that the soldiers no longer have the will to fight. Hillian Cagil is stunned by the suggestion to give up. He cannot bring himself to accept this reality. Hillian Cagil and the army confirm that the expedition has failed, preferring to quit rather than sacrifice their lives. Hillian Cagil grinds his teeth in frustration, his face a mix of anger and helplessness. Suddenly, the tower appears deep within the valley, causing the remaining members of the army to dwindle significantly. Hillian Cagil and the remaining survivors rush inside, determined to wipe out the weak monsters on the first floor. Observing from afar, Burge Diaz has anticipated everything and is just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The tower gate opens and rows of magical cannons glow brightly, aiming directly at Hillian Cagil and his comrades. Hillian Cagil freezes in the face of the terrifying firepower, unable to process what is happening. Destructive beams from the magical cannons fire, turning everything into a sea of flames. The overwhelming power tears through space, sweeping away every obstacle in its path. Burge Diaz coldly mutters that he wants to see with his own eyes these self-proclaimed heroes being torn to pieces. Burge Diaz smirks, realizing that this attack was still not enough to finish them all off. Hillian Cagil screams amidst the smoke and dust as a scene of devastation unfolds before him with soldiers falling. Hillian Cagil trembles as he stands up, his sword shaking violently from the shock of the overwhelming power. Hillian Cagil cries out in despair, unable to understand how the Demon King possesses such absurd strength. Granada cautiously observes his surroundings and calls out to Hillian Cagil, who is standing not far away. Hillian Cagil replies that he managed to dodge the previous attack just in time. Hillian Cagil orders Granada to continue to the next floor. Hearing the suggestion that only the two of them should proceed, Hillian Cagil cannot help but feel uneasy. Hillian Cagil grips his sword, which emits a blue magical current. He confidently asserts that the power absorbed from the previous Demon King of Desire will allow him to easily defeat the current Demon King. Hillian Cagil walks forward with determination, reassuring Granada that he still has him as a loyal companion. Both enter the second floor, but the system informs them that the status of this floor is completely empty. Continuing to move to the third floor, Hillian Cagil and Granada still see no signs of monsters. Everything remains empty. Hillian Kajal notices the anomaly of the consistently vacant floors. He warns Granada that they must prepare for the unexpected. They enter the fourth floor of the tower, and the sight before them leaves them both stunned. Hillian Kajal exclaims in astonishment at the vibrant forest that has appeared within the tower. Hillian Kajal wonders to himself if this is truly the Demon King's tower, given the drastic differences between the floors. A strange noise echoes, drawing the attention of Hillian Kajal and Granada toward the darkness ahead. Hillian Kajal is stunned to realize the presence of an unexpected character appearing. 0. Ernyan appears, declaring herself one of the 4 monarchs under the Demon King and vowing to protect him. 1. With a defiant grin, Ernyan challenges Hillian Kajal, identifying herself as the Spirit Mage of Darkness. 2. Hillian Kajal and Granada are completely stunned by Ernyan's baffling behavior in the middle of the forest. 3. Hillian Kajal cannot believe his eyes. He calls out Ernyan's name in utter disbelief. For casting aside her title as princess, Ernyan asserts that she is indeed the Spirit Mage of Darkness. 5. A terrifying surge of dark power begins to erupt around Ernyan, causing the ground to shake violently. 6. Ernyan raises both hands, summoning dark energy that sends surrounding boulders floating, exerting crushing pressure on Hillian Kajal. 7. Recognizing Ernyan's signature spirit magic, Hillian Kajal is horrified to realize she isn't being controlled by anyone. 8. Hillian Kajal recalls the threats they faced, from wild orcs to the harrowing avalanches that he and Granada endured. 9. Hillian Kajal remembers the surprise attacks at night, the tower hidden in the valley, and the magic cannons on the first floor. 10. Hillian Kajal pieces everything together, from the empty tower floors to Ernyan's corruption. Nothing had gone according to his plans. 11. Ernyan lets out a sinister laugh that echoes throughout the forest. 12. Hillian Kajal screams in fury, unable to fathom why Ernyan would attack the hero who came to save her, and swears he won't spare anyone. 13. Hillian Kajal appears wreathed in brilliant purple magic, challenging Hillian Kajal with a look of utter contempt. 14. Hillian Kajal's magical attack slams into the ground, creating a massive explosion that rocks the entire area. 15. Hillian Kajal stands there, engulfed in purple energy, sarcastically welcoming Hillian Kajal. 16. Hillian Kajal steps forward, the darkness following him spreading everywhere. 17. Hillian Kajal braces himself in a defensive stance, acidly demanding to know the Demon King's location and questioning Granada's whereabouts. 18. Hillian Kajal has identified his target, a figure standing amidst a mysterious flow of magical light. 19. Amidst the chaotic battlefield, Burj Diaz makes an overwhelming entrance, leaving Granada astonished by the surging electrical energy. 20. A storm of electricity engulfs Granada, and all his senses are paralyzed in an instant. 21. Hillian Kajal suddenly lunges close, grips Granada's shoulder, and proposes they join forces to fight. 22. Granada feels the precious life force within his body being cruelly drained away. 23. Hillian Kajal smiles triumphantly, his hand clutching the magic ring as he sustains the searing green energy flow. 24. Granada collapses onto the grass, his every attempt at resistance becoming futile. 25. Burj Diaz narrows his eyes, staring at the ring on Hillian Kajal's finger, recognizing the impending danger. 26. Hillian Kajal doesn't hesitate to reveal it as a forbidden artifact called the Elf Eater, an evil item that drains life to convert into magic power. 27. Hillian Kajal stomps on Granada, nonchalantly declaring that Granada's death is a worthy price for the greater cause. 28. With his final breath, Granada curses Hillian Kajal as a deceitful traitor. 29. Burj Diaz laughs gleefully, clearly amused by Hillian Kajal's cruelty. 30. But immediately after, Burj Diaz questions how strong Hillian Kajal would truly be without that ring. 31. Having his pride wounded, Hillian Kajal roars in rage, calling Burj Diaz a useless worm. 32. Hillian Kajal confidently asserts that even the Demon King himself couldn't take the ring from him. 33. A cold voice rings out, calling him by his name directly. 34. Hillian Kajal freezes, his previous confidence evaporates in a heartbeat. 35. Pain surges as Hillian Kajal is horrified to realize that the hand holding the ring has been severed. 36. Burj Diaz appears right behind him, mocking Hillian Kajal for being both rude and noisy. 37. A lightning-fast sword strike cuts through the air, leaving behind powerful magical aftershocks. 38. Hillian Kajal is sent flying, his body trembling violently under the pressure of the attack. 39. Hillian Kajal cannot believe it, he has just been defeated by Burj Diaz. The hand of Burj Diaz reaches out, crushing every shred of hope from Hillian Kajal. Burj Diaz whispers into Hillian Kajal's ear, questioning his pathetic attempt to escape. Hillian Kajal is gripped by absolute panic, desperately trying to evade the death closing in on him. A surge of purple malevolent energy erupts, the manifestation of a terrifying entity begins to rise from Burj Diaz. Hillian Kajal feels infinitesimal against the darkness that consumes the space around him. The darkness swallows everything in its path, leaving nothing but void. Burj Diaz unleashes his finishing move, sending a blazing orb of purple magical power hurtling straight toward Hylian Kagel. Hylian Kagel screams in utter despair, unable to comprehend the overwhelming power of Burj Diaz. Hylian Kagel cowers in fear, cold sweat drenching his body as he faces the suffocating pressure crashing down upon him. Burj Diaz wears a cruel smile, his glowing red eyes radiating bloodlust as he declares that Hylian Kagel deserves a painful beating. The name Hylian Kagel echoes like a death sentence, leaving Hylian Kagel trembling in sheer terror. Before Hylian Kagel can even react, a powerful strike imbued with blazing purple energy slams directly into him. A fierce magical explosion erupts from Burj Diaz's power, with a purple light radiating outward to obliterate everything in sight. Amidst the desolate battlefield, Burj Diaz stands tall, towering over Hylian Kagel, who lies defeated on the ground. Burj Diaz gasps for air, his eyes filled with intense tension following the fierce battle that just concluded. Burj Diaz gasps in astonishment, unable to believe what he has just witnessed. Burj Diaz orders his subordinates to seize Hylian Kagel and the remaining survivors. With his final breath, Hylian Kagel wheezes, whispering about the river of fate. Burj Diaz rewards Hylian Kagel with a precious medicinal herb. Hylian Kagel opens his eyes in shock, stunned by the strange transformation taking hold of his body. Hylian Kagel's life energy is recovering at an unbelievable rate. Hylian Kagel wonders why Burj Diaz would use such a valuable herb on him, especially since the princess received the exact same reward. Lojer joyfully accepts the orders from Burj Diaz, preparing to dismantle the tower. Burj Diaz commands everyone to disperse to carry out the necessary maintenance work. Bekrox and the princess watch Burj Diaz's retreating figure, unable to help but admire his strength. The princess notices something unusual about Burj Diaz the moment he turns away. Burj Diaz can no longer maintain his composure, he collapses from exhaustion. Burj Diaz's trembling hand grips the ground tightly. Burj Diaz crashes to the floor, panting heavily after trying to hold it together in front of everyone. Burj Diaz silently marvels at the terrifying power of Hylian Kagel. The images of powerful warriors appear like stars shining in the night sky. Although Hylian Kagel is a formidable opponent, he is the weakest among them. Burj Diaz tells himself that if Hylian Kagel had been fully rested, he would have certainly been defeated. Burj Diaz had calculated carefully to drain Hylian Kagel's stamina. Burj Diaz planned the provocation to make Hylian Kagel lose his cool. Fury erupts on Hylian Kagel's face as he is provoked by Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz seizes the opportunity when Hylian Kagel leaves himself open due to his overwhelming rage. Hylian Kagel let his emotions take control, creating a fatal opening. Burj Diaz delivers the final blow, successfully ending the battle. Burj Diaz smiles, proud of his absolute victory. Burj Diaz realizes he possesses the power to change destiny. Burj Diaz is determined to rewrite the future according to his own will. Burj Diaz wears a cryptic smile, preparing for his next plan. Thighs full of calculation and a smirk, the king is setting his sights directly on the heroes. Rumors are spreading that the heroes are giving up because they couldn't find the tower, but is the truth really that simple? Suspicion arises when news breaks that Hylian Kagel is still trapped in Urzist, leaving everyone in shock. Furious, the king roars in contempt at the useless heroes who failed to recognize the power of his signature black flames. After abandoning the expedition, Walton Kolo makes a shocking statement that there is absolutely no tower on the peak of Urzist. The king grinds his teeth in rage, cursing that man for completely ignoring the common rules. A firm statement is made, confirming the suspicions that have been circulating. Walton Kolo looks ahead with a serious expression, admitting that this demon king is completely different from anyone they have ever faced before. At the Hotenwalk assembly, confusion reigns as news of the failed expedition surfaces and the massive budget has gone down the drain. The investors cannot remain calm, they are constantly questioning and demanding answers for this disastrous failure. Walton Kolo hurriedly reassured the crowd, insisting that there was still hope and that it was too early to call this a total failure. Walton Kolo urgently pleaded for everyone's patience as Hylian Kagel and the other heroes were still actively searching for the tower. News of the new Demon King spread across the continent like an uncontrollable wildfire. The king roared in fury, threatening to take Hylian Kagel's head if he didn't bring the princess back, while the princess could only scream, demanding to see Lojer. The rumors became increasingly distorted and exaggerated, plunging the entire continent into extreme panic. At the same time, the magical energy levels of Burj Diaz were rising at an alarming rate. Walton Kolo stood before the council, swearing to the authenticity of the information he had reported. Pledging his honor, Walton Kolo firmly insisted that every word he spoke was the absolute truth. The council deemed this a grave matter and decided to proceed with extreme caution as the identity of the Demon King remained a mystery. They still placed their faith in Hylian Kagel, a 10-star hero who would not be easily defeated. A 10-day waiting period was set. If silence persisted, a major decision would be made. It would mobilize all 4,728 heroes across the continent to destroy the new Demon King at any cost. Deep within the dungeons of Burj Diaz's tower, cries of agony echoed as a dark shadow approached. Burj Diaz looked at the shackled Hylian Kagel, calmly commenting on the prisoner's resilience. Hylian Kagel, despite being captive, remained defiant and demanded that Burj Diaz get straight to the point. Burj Diaz smiled with amusement at Hylian Kagel's bluntness. Without hesitation, Burj Diaz made an ambitious proposal. He wanted Hylian Kagel to become his loyal subordinate. Hylian Kagel was stunned, unable to believe what he had just heard, wondering if his ears were playing tricks on him. Burj Diaz nonchalantly brought up the exorbitant costs of expeditions, from food and weapons to high-end gear, to persuade Hylian Kagel. Burj Diaz coldly analyzed the harsh reality of expeditions, where the burden of debt always weighed heavily on the heroes. Burj Diaz twisted the knife with the brutal truth: if the mission failed, those who backed the investment would be buried in debt. With an enigmatic smile, Burj Diaz questioned who had actually funneled all the resources for this expedition. Burj Diaz pointed directly at Hylian Kagel, the expedition leader, leaving him shaken in his chains. Hylian Kagel panicked, realizing that even if he fled, he could never escape the shadow of failure and the crushing debt that followed him. Beacrox stepped forward, coldly confirming that he was the one who had leaked everything to Burj Diaz. Hylian Kagel screamed in betrayal, but Beacrox nonchalantly admitted that he had been a mole from the very beginning. Burj Diaz stepped closer, declaring that he was a different breed of Demon King, one who would teach traitors a lesson in adaptation. Burj Diaz activated the Armani Orb, a sinister surveillance magical artifact resting in his palm. Burj Diaz explained the cruel mechanism of the orb, which would embed itself into the brain and could be detonated at any moment. Burj Diaz threatened Hylian Kagel, stating that if his body could not adapt to the artifact, death would be his only release. Hylian Kagel cried out in desperation, asserting that his hero class status could not be easily conquered by mind control magic. Burj Diaz was delighted by the resistance. He knew that heroes could always be coerced into dropping their own mental defenses. Hylian Kagel tried to resist one last time, refusing to surrender to the one called the Demon King. Burj Diaz's hand tightened around Hylian Kagel's throat, cutting off any futile protest. Burj Diaz forced Hylian Kagel to accept the artifact, ordering him to submit immediately. Hylian Kagel gulped, his eyes filled with terror as the artifact began to invade his body. Burj Diaz watched casually, wondering if Hylian Kagel would continue to resist to the bitter end. Excruciating pain caused Hylian Kagel to convulse, but Burj Diaz insisted that it no longer mattered. Burj Diaz coldly watched Hylian Kagel being manipulated by magic, viewing him as nothing more than a tool to make money. Hylian Kagel screamed in hopelessness, cursing his fate as his reason was eroded by the magic. System announces the new status of Hylian Kagel. The Demon King's attendant has been established. Silence blankets the meeting place, where Burj Diaz is contemplating his next moves. Beacrox reminds Burj Diaz of the massive 100,000 gold coin debt weighing down his plans. With only 2,000 gold coins remaining from the sale of demonic energy, Burj Diaz faces immense financial pressure. Burj Diaz smiles confidently, revealing that a mysterious invitation is about to be sent. Burj Diaz looks toward the round table, where shadows of power are gathering. Burj Diaz recalls his past life, when he used to despise the idea of demon kings gathering together. Now, Burj Diaz sees an opportunity to profit from the demon kings who have long existed in Arian. Beacrox is horrified by Burj Diaz's insane plan, wondering if he intends to sell demonic energy for gold once again. An unexpected notification rings out in the quiet space, leaving Beacrox stunned, his eyes revealing sheer astonishment. Beacrox trembles as he reports on the invitation card to the Magic Tower conference. His mind seems to have found a strange new glimmer of hope. Burj Diaz wears a meaningful smile at this news and decisively orders an immediate departure. The Tower of Lies, the place where this world's darkest secrets are hidden. On the 13th floor, the Demon King's lair, the air grew thick and tense. Burj Diaz strode into the conference room, speaking with full confidence. "I am not late, but it seems you all have been waiting for me for quite a while." Burj Diaz flashed an arrogant smile and challenged them directly. "Were you discussing something without my presence?" Burj Diaz, the Demon King of the Fire Abyss, appeared wielding the power of the Fire Demon Dragon. Braxon Doldoff, the Demon King of Beasts, growled with murderous intent upon seeing Burj Diaz. Reyna Sordian, the Demon King of Frost, spoke coldly. "So, you are the one everyone is making such a fuss about." Ugur Belvek, the Demon King of Determination, roared, "You fool, how dare you show up here after violating the rules?" Jason Kokmundo, the Demon King of Lies, greeted him with a smile. "Welcome to the meeting, Lord Burj Diaz." Burj Diaz retorted with contempt, "A bunch of idiots. A conference, you say? You are supposed to be Demon Kings. Where has your pride gone?" Ugur Belvek flew into a rage, bellowing, "You bastard! Do you think you can speak to us like that just because you're a newcomer? Burge Diaz thought to himself, one little nudge and they'll show their true colors. This guy is brimming with bloodlust. Burge Diaz challenged him. I am the only one among us who graduated as valedictorian. If you're so eager to die, I'll be happy to oblige. Amidst the escalating tension, Jason Copemundo suddenly clapped his hands. The sound of clapping echoed, cutting short the fury between Ugur Belvec and Burge Diaz. Jason Copemundo said calmly, Ugur Belvec, Burge Diaz, please stay calm. We are here to hold a meeting. Please behave accordingly. Burge Diaz realized with surprise he erased the bloodlust of two demon kings in an instant. It wasn't magic, so what was it? His own power, or that of this tower? Jason Copemundo smiled. Very good, I appreciate your cooperation. Burge Diaz calculated, if it is the tower's doing, could he be using some sort of device like a magic illusion? Burge Diaz told himself, unfounded speculation is useless, it's best to observe carefully. Jason Copemundo declared, let the meeting begin. Please, feel free to talk. Draxen Doldov stared straight at Burge Diaz. I have a question for you, Burge. Draxen Doldov growled threateningly, where is Hylian Kagel? Burge Diaz remained silent, and the air in the room became extremely tense. Burge Diaz still did not say a word. This is chapter 13 of the series Too Many Heroes for the Demon Lord. The Demon King's subordinates whispered, what happened to Hylian Kagel? Is he dead? Jason Copemundo's subordinate replied awkwardly, I don't know, he didn't make it to the tower. He's probably still wandering the Urzest mountains. Don't ask me anymore. Burge Diaz had instructed his subordinates to pretend they knew nothing if anyone asked about Hylian Kagel. Burge Diaz emphasized that those individuals were acting as spies, so they must not reveal any information under any circumstances. Despite his trust in his superior's wisdom, Burge Diaz still felt there was something truly strange about the Demon King he served. Unable to contain his frustration, Burge Diaz roared in anger, calling the Demon King an idiot who wouldn't listen to a single word he said. Just for a second of turning his back, that Demon King would do something crazy that left Burge Diaz feeling utterly exhausted. The other Demon Kings sympathized, discussing the annoyingly similar nature of the Demon Kings they served. Burge Diaz could only listen in silence, understanding the plight of those in the same situation. In the middle of the tense meeting, a challenging question arose as to whether anyone could actually believe what was happening. Ugur Belvec flew into a rage, questioning why Hylian Kagel couldn't reach the tower and suspecting that Burge Diaz was trying to make a fool of him. Jason Copemundo sarcastically asked if the heroes were currently searching for Burge Diaz's tower and if he had abandoned it just to attend this meeting. Jason Copemundo continued to dig into Burge Diaz's past at the Demon King Military Academy, where he had been an outstanding valedictorian. Burge Diaz responded coldly, telling Jason Copemundo to keep his concern to himself and asserting that he would protect the tower on his own. Looking at Burge Diaz, Jason Copemundo inwardly thought that this demon lord of deceit was truly insufferable. Jason Copemundo laughed mockingly, declaring that he would put an end to the matter right there. Draxen Doldov roared in anger, questioning if Jason Copemundo truly believed that Archduke Lameth would tolerate such insolence. Inside the luxurious meeting room, every assertion became meaningless when no one could verify the truth. Burge Diaz reminded himself not to lose sight of his main goal, collecting 100,000 gold coins. The exchange between the demon lords dragged on, a conversation Burge Diaz had absolutely no interest in participating in. Jason Copemundo kept rambling, attempting to impose his power and status. The hierarchy of power was crystal clear here, and Jason Copemundo was obviously sitting in the highest position. While observing from the sidelines, Burge Diaz searched for a demon lord who was truly craving demonic energy points. Reyna Sordian's gaze flickered over, creating a moment of meaningful silence. Burge Diaz was bewildered, failing to understand what was happening amidst this sudden attention. On the balcony of the 13th floor of the Tower of Deceit, a secret meeting began to unfold. Reyna Sordian stood there, waiting for the arrival of the person she wanted to speak with privately. Reyna Sordian shared that ever since she heard the rumors, she had always wanted to have a private conversation with Burge Diaz. Reyna Sordian stated that she somewhat agreed with Burge Diaz's perspective, leaving him quite surprised. Burge Diaz was stunned, wondering if Reyna Sordian had ever said similar things in his previous life. Reyna Sordian asked Burge Diaz not to misunderstand her intentions, as she was truly dedicated to the rules. However, Reyna Sordian believed that sometimes flexibility was necessary, especially in a place like Arian, which was why she wanted to find someone as rational as Burge Diaz. Burge Diaz faced Reyna Sordian. The two of them engaged in a conversation filled with hidden meanings about their initial impressions. Reyna Sordian proposed a private communication channel ready to assist Burge Diaz whenever he needed advice. Burge Diaz accepted Reyna Sordian's concession, provided that she respected his rules, as finding a compatible conversation partner was not easy. Reyna Sordian took the opportunity to mention the Demon Lord, who also appeared incredibly skillful in communication. Reina Sordian discreetly evaluated the Demon Lord, suggesting that while the Demon Lord was unpredictable, he was still better than the other fools. Reina Sordian left, leaving Burge Diaz alone in the quiet space of the tower. Burge Diaz told himself that this trip had indeed brought him very valuable gains. Turning to the tower, which stood majestically amidst the frozen, snow-covered land. On the first floor, Ephraim suddenly appeared and invited the chibi giant to enjoy some cookies, leaving the chibi giant astonished. Ephraim excitedly explained that the Demon Lord provided the ingredients while she had baked them herself. With help from the spirits, Ephraim had created top-tier cookies, making the chibi giant gasp in amazement. The chibi giant could not resist the invitation and eagerly accepted the cookie from Ephraim's hand. The chibi giant took a large bite, a satisfying crunch echoing through the air. The explosion of flavor left the chibi giant stunned. It was the most amazing taste he had ever known. Pure magical energy surged through his body. The chibi giant felt as if he were touching heaven. Ephraim smiled and asked how he liked it, while the chibi giant remained completely enthralled by the treat. Ephraim revealed the secret of the touch of spirit herbs added to the mix, making the chibi giant even more amazed by Ephraim's generosity. Ephraim considered this a gesture of friendship, as she believed the two would be meeting many more times in the future. Ephraim asked if Granada liked the cookies, and the chibi giant confirmed definitively that he did. Ephraim continued to ask about the Demon Lord, causing the chibi giant to be surprised by this special interest. Burge Diaz walked across the arena, his footsteps echoing throughout the space. The assembly has concluded, and a brief meeting has just come to an end. Jason Coquemundo suggests that Burge Diaz stay behind to enjoy a cup of tea together. Burge Diaz interlaces his fingers, bracing himself for the next important conversation. Jason Coquemundo offers a cryptic smile, reminding Burge Diaz of his financial needs. Jason Coquemundo asserts that what Burge Diaz truly needs is human currency. Burge Diaz's eyes widen, with shock clearly written across his face. Burge Diaz questions him back, trying to discern the true intentions behind Jason Coquemundo's proposal. Burge Diaz wonders how Jason Coquemundo could possibly know such sensitive information. Jason Coquemundo wore a sinister smile, his fingers interlaced as if calculating a devious scheme. Burge Diaz's eyes suddenly narrowed, a terrifying flash of realization flickering through his mind. Unable to hide his bewilderment, Burge Diaz gritted his teeth and demanded an explanation from Jason Coquemundo regarding what had just been said. Jason Coquemundo maintained his mocking expression, touching the magic circle with his finger as he nonchalantly revealed that everything had been orchestrated by Lord Doldov. Decisively putting an end to the meaningless mind games, Jason Coquemundo coldly declared that it was time to talk business. Jason Coquemundo made a tempting offer, ready to trade a massive amount of gold for Burge Diaz's demonic energy points. Burge Diaz narrowed his eyes in caution. He needed to clearly understand the price he would have to pay for this deal. Jason Coquemundo insisted that he was on Burge Diaz's side, a promise that reeked of danger. Laughter echoed as Jason Coquemundo feigned sincerity, expressing his desire for a long-term partnership. Burge Diaz ordered Hillian Cagil to quickly gather 100,000 gold coins. Hillian Cagil did not forget to remind him that the funds must be handled discreetly, leaving absolutely no trail behind. In his mind, Burge Diaz felt like a puppet, terrified that Jason Coquemundo would uncover every crime he had committed. Overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness, Burge Diaz told himself that he would not become someone else's pawn. Burge Diaz's gaze grew cold and sharp. He decided to tread carefully until he fully understood Jason Coquemundo's true intentions. The survivors had been transformed into dark knights and mages, all under Hillian Cagil's control. Burge Diaz explained to Hillian Cagil that he had already learned of Jason Coquemundo's true identity through the demonic contract. The Dark Knights felt humiliated serving a demon lord and begged Hillian Cagil for salvation. Hillian Cagil sighed in relief that the mission wasn't a total failure. He could still pay off his debts and continue on his path as a hero. With no other options, Hillian Cagil accepted the deal and prepared to take action. Hillian Cagil casually referred to Burge Diaz as his partner and began his work. His subordinates were horrified to hear Hillian Cagil address Burge Diaz with such familiarity. Burge Diaz gripped the magical artifact, his eyes filled with menace as he heard Hillian Cagil use the word partner. A sharp, agonizing pain surged through Hillian Cagil's brain as the punitive magic was activated. Burge Diaz coldly reminded Hillian Cagil to be careful with his choice of words. Burge Diaz bluntly declared that Hillian Cagil was merely a slave and he alone was the master. Hillian Cagil collapsed in pain, while Burge Diaz coldly turned his back and walked away, having no need for fake loyalty. Hillian Cagil seemed to be in a difficult position, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead when Elena suddenly appeared. Elena handed Hillian Cagil a purple envelope, earnestly pleading for him to deliver it to her younger sister. Hillian Cagil was momentarily surprised to hear about the 13th princess of the Hildren Kingdom, but he did not refuse the request. Hillian Kajal could not suppress his suspicion, questioning Elena on why she would side with the very person who had driven him into this miserable situation. Elena skillfully avoided the topic of returning to the kingdom, reminding Hillian Kajal that someone like him must surely understand the dark secrets of the royal family. Hillian Kajal admitted that he had heard rumors but questioned whether the truth was truly that reliable. Amidst the icy mountain range, the tower stood tall as a symbol of power and solitude. At the palace, Burj Diaz sat upon his throne while Jason Kokmundo expressed his doubts regarding Hillian Kajal's loyalty. Whether someone like Hillian Kajal would truly follow Burj Diaz's orders was a question that deeply bothered Jason Kokmundo. Burj Diaz calmly asserted that Hillian Kajal was not merely a greedy person, even if his appearance led others to mistakenly believe otherwise. Burj Diaz remarked that Hillian Kajal's obsession with gold and silver was not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Burj Diaz insisted that while Hillian Kajal was not a noble soul, he was not the type to be easily swayed by pure greed alone. Burj Diaz speculated that Hillian Kajal's true goal did not lie in fame or glory. Instead, Burj Diaz believes that Hillian Kajal is craving fame, something he can easily exploit. Burj Diaz holds the magic orb in his hand, confident that with this item, Hillian Kajal will become the perfect pawn. Jason Kokmundo observes Burj Diaz, thinking to himself that Burj Diaz is truly a master at understanding human nature. Jason Kokmundo cannot sit idly by and watch Burj Diaz shoulder everything. A corrupted Hillian Kajal would be the perfect tool to destroy society from within. Burj Diaz smiles enigmatically as the magic orb emits a dark surge of energy, signaling that a performance is about to begin. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupts the conversation between Burj Diaz and Jason Kokmundo. Elena appears at the door, carrying a tray of cookies along with tiny souls, offering them to Burj Diaz to try. Burj Diaz coldly warns Elena that if these cookies aren't delicious, she will get a taste of the dungeon. Elena remains unfazed and urges Burj Diaz to try just one piece. Burj Diaz takes a cookie, still filled with skepticism toward human desserts. As soon as he tastes it, Burj Diaz is startled by the strange and alluring flavor. Elena smiles triumphantly. She has achieved the exact reaction she expected from Burj Diaz. Burj Diaz tries to suppress his emotions, his hand clenching tightly as if struggling with himself. Burj Diaz exclaims in shock, unable to fathom why he was not immune to this taste. Burj Diaz questions Elena about whether she secretly added soul herbs to the cookies, an incredibly dangerous act. Burj Diaz looks at Elena with a complex expression, realizing she didn't just want to offer cookies but had other motives. Elena wears an enigmatic smile, as if hiding a shocking secret about to be revealed. Escorted by Krutu, Hillian Kajal's group has safely departed from the snowy peak. As soon as they set foot in Houghton Walk, the group immediately uses teleportation magic to head straight to Hildren. Meanwhile, in Granada, another event is quietly unfolding. At the headquarters of the Crimson Hawk Mercenary Guild, Jason Kokmundo is demonstrating his overwhelming power. Jason Kokmundo furiously interrogates his subordinates for abandoning him during the horrific avalanche. The trembling mercenary pleads, justifying that facing death at Ursus left them no choice but to flee to survive. Refusing to accept the excuses, Jason Kokmundo unleashes a brutal strike, catching the traitor off guard. As Jason Kokmundo steps closer, the air in the room becomes suffocating when he mentions Granada. Jason Kokmundo raises an eyebrow, his cold gaze directed at the person who just arrived. A female knight appears, asserting herself as a hero and expressing her desire to join their ranks. The female knight places a hand over her heart, her gaze firm as she begs for a chance to accompany them. Jason Kokmundo is surprised to hear about a hero who secretly paid for the group's drinks while he was away. Losing patience with his noisy subordinates, Jason Kokmundo shouts, demanding order immediately. Jason Kokmundo coldly announces that the expedition is over because Hillian Kajal and his teammates have already left Houghton Walk. The female knight does not give up. She resolutely demands to know what happened, even while facing Jason Kokmundo's rejection. Sunset falls over the city, shrouding the ancient rooftops in silence. Inside the inn, the conversation continues as the female knight is stunned to learn that the tower is not located on the mountain peak. With no reason to linger, the female knight places gold coins on the table as a gesture of thanks before leaving. Jason Kokmundo watches the female knight's retreating figure, the sound of her armor clanking dryly in the quiet space. Jason Kokmundo dismissively labels the female knight as a naive rookie, one who will inevitably be betrayed in this cruel world. The female knight walks down the narrow street, the lonely silhouette of a hero clad in silver armor. Jason Kokmundo observes from afar, his gaze never leaving the figures moving through the alleyway. Jason Kokmundo remains deep in thought, calculating the next moves in his scheme. In a dark alleyway in Houghton Walk, a group of mysterious figures surrounds the female knight. The rooftop is deathly silent, concealing the turbulent events about to unfold. The guards demand the female knight return at once, as her fiancé is waiting for her. Jason Copemundo, following closely behind, is stunned to discover that the female knight's true identity is that of a princess. Even after learning this earth-shattering secret, Jason Copemundo remains indifferent, acting as if it is none of his business. Suddenly, a cold flash of light streaks from a blade, cutting through the silence of the night. Lillian Kajal confronts Jason Copemundo for tailing her, pointing her blade directly at him in a threatening manner. Lillian Kajal does not hesitate to interrogate him about his identity and the suspicious magic he is wielding. Jason Copemundo breaks into a cold sweat, his mind screaming in panic. He realizes he has made a grave mistake by carrying the magic tool from the Demon King. If he is caught now, his identity as a lackey will be exposed immediately. The air around Lillian Kajal thickens with killing intent. She growls, suspecting Jason Copemundo of being a spy from another kingdom, and declares that she will show no mercy if that turns out to be true. Facing the suffocating pressure from Lillian Kajal, Jason Copemundo can only realize in horror that he has pushed himself into a life-or-death situation. A massive explosion tore through the space, and Burj Diaz burst out from the smoke and dust, catching the guards completely off guard. Warning, an intruder has been spotted. The guards rushed forward frantically, determined not to let their target escape. Confronted with such a sudden appearance, the guards couldn't help but feel bewildered as they faced Burj Diaz. A shout rang out, ordering Ki Jespine to retreat immediately to save her life. Ernyan gritted her teeth. She knew perfectly well that if she used her fairy powers now, her true identity would be exposed in an instant. But if she didn't fight back, death was inevitable, especially with the guards surrounding her with no way out. With no path left, Ernyan decided to trigger her magic, accepting the risk of exposure to fight for her survival. An authoritative voice boomed, and Burj Diaz appeared, mocking Ernyan for her hesitation. Dark magic erupted around Burj Diaz, and the overwhelming pressure left Ernyan trembling. Burj Diaz hovered in midair, emitting a killing intent that made everyone shudder at his sheer power. Ernyan retorted furiously, claiming that Burj Diaz had no idea of the dire situation she was currently facing. The guards drew their swords in unison, assuming Burj Diaz had come to kidnap Ki Jespine, and vowed to protect the princess to the end. Burj Diaz expressed surprise at Ki Jespine's identity, even as the soldiers remained determined to surround him. Ernyan didn't hesitate to fire back, questioning the true reason behind Burj Diaz's presence here. Burj Diaz calmly asserted that he was merely handling personal business, dismissing the encounter as pure coincidence. His blatant lie infuriated Ernyan. She didn't believe a word of that ridiculous coincidence for a second. Inside the solemn palace hall, Burj Diaz sat upon the throne and asked Ernyan directly about her true intentions. Ernyan didn't hesitate to reveal her desire to obtain seneal powder, a rare ingredient needed to form contracts with spirits. The story flashes back to a fairy named Seneal who sought out the human kingdom to plead for help. The king at the time tasked her with creating an intermediary item to help humans connect more easily with spirits. That was the origin of seneal powder, a treasure containing a mystical power of connection. Burj Diaz was skeptical of Ernyan's abilities, arguing that she wouldn't need seneal powder if she truly possessed superior power. Ernyan explained the lack of magic within the tower, forcing her to rely on seneal powder to sustain the spirit's existence. Burj Diaz subtly acknowledged that Ernyan belonged to a high-ranking class, a fact she couldn't deny. In the past, Ernyan had shocked the entire continent by successfully signing a contract with a high-level spirit at just 27 years old. Burj Diaz wondered why she wanted to perform the contract earlier than planned, leaving Ernyan surprised by how much he knew. Burj Diaz nonchalantly enjoyed his cookies, bringing the conversation to a mysterious end. Burj Diaz declared that he still had work to do and would quickly wrap everything up here. Ki Jespine was left stunned, watching as the dark power of Burj Diaz engulfed the surroundings. A massive explosion rang out, and Burj Diaz's terrifying magic leveled everything in his path. Burj Diaz silently observed the battlefield with a cold, piercing gaze. Burj Diaz's eyes suddenly narrowed. It seemed he had just spotted an interesting variable amidst the ruins. Amidst the desolate battlefield, Ki Jespine stood firm with a radiant aura, cheered on by the knights. Ki Jespine tightened her grip on her sword, her eyes burning with determination. She refused to be confined within the suffocating castle walls. The only place where Ki Jespine truly belonged was this blood-soaked battlefield. Ki Jespine unleashed the Crescent Slash, a supreme technique of the Jespine family, creating a strike that tore through the air. This was the ultimate move that cemented Ki Jespine's status. Ki Jespine would rather fight to her last breath than be forced into marriage with other nobles. Extreme resentment burned in Ki Jespine's eyes, and she swore she would never bow down to fate. To gain this power, Ki Jespine had to endure brutal training under the royal swordmaster. Hoping to defeat Burj Diaz, Ki Jespine lunged forward like an arrow. By taking down Burj Diaz, Ki Jespine could finally break free from her father's control and claim her own destiny. Ki Jespine let out a roar, determined to choose the man for her life with her own hands. With just a snap of his fingers, Burj Diaz effortlessly neutralized Ki Jespine's powerful attack. Burj Diaz offered a scornful smile, casually praising Qi Jespine's swordsmanship before crushing it completely. Qi Jespine was stunned, unable to believe that her ultimate technique had failed so quickly. Burj Diaz bathed the battlefield in brilliant magical energy, challenging Qi Jespine's very survival. Qi Jespine stood there, alone against the destructive power radiating from Burj Diaz. Facing Burj Diaz, Qi Jespine realized with horror the terrifying entity standing before her. Burj Diaz smirked. He had found a delightful new toy in the form of a princess. Utter fear filled Qi Jespine's eyes as she stood face to face with Burj Diaz. The knight screamed in warning, desperately trying to shield Qi Jespine from the imminent danger. Deafening explosion echoed, flattening a corner of the town under the sheer might of Burj Diaz. Amidst the thick dust, the knights were horrified to sense the dark magic and discover their fallen comrades. The entire area was leveled, and the surviving knights searched desperately through the rubble. Survivors were terrified to hear the news of Qi Jespine's disappearance and the arrival of Burj Diaz. Through the black smoke and dark flames, the soldiers wondered if this was divine punishment from Burj Diaz. From afar, the tower of Burj Diaz loomed over the snowy mountains, a place hiding dark secrets. In the cold dungeon, Qi Jespine lay motionless, her body covered in injuries after the battle. Ernyan appeared, carefully checking on Qi Jespine while Burj Diaz watched from behind. Burj Diaz ordered Ernyan to tend to Qi Jespine's wounds. He admitted that kidnapping her was merely a coincidence in his journey. Burj Diaz explained that the true purpose of his royal kidnappings was to accumulate ghostly energy points, prioritizing lower-ranked targets. Burj Diaz quickly shifted the conversation. He decided to leave to find senile powder, realizing he had grown accustomed to Ernyan's presence. News of Qi Jespine's abduction at Houghton Walk spread across the continent like wildfire. Panic gripped the kingdoms as the news of Qi Jespine's kidnapping sparked widespread public outrage. At the Hero Association headquarters, leaders fiercely questioned the validity of the report following their failure to locate the Demon King's tower. Reporter bowed in shame, admitting defeat and accepting full responsibility for failing to pinpoint the tower's location. However, the heads of the Hero Association argued that punishing the team leader after a failed expedition was unnecessary. They feared that harsh disciplinary actions would discourage future heroes from stepping forward. Under pressure from the Empire regarding Qi Jespine's kidnapping, the Hero Association requested proposals from those who led the previous expedition. The leadership team cautiously suggested sending a small scouting party first rather than rushing into a large-scale expedition. They believed that once the tower's location was confirmed, victory would be within their grasp. The Hero Association argued that a true Demon King confident in his own power would have no reason to hide his tower. The members of the Hero Association agreed, claiming that an enemy who dared not show himself was no major threat. They confidently asserted that with their current strength, the Hero Association had nothing to fear from this enemy. The atmosphere in the meeting room turned somber as the leaders carefully considered the next plan of action. Ultimately, the Hero Association decided to accept the proposal, temporarily postponing the full-scale attack. In the shadows, the eyes of Burj Diaz gleamed. He had achieved his goal of manipulating the Hero Association's decision. Orders were transmitted and acknowledged with deep reverence, confirming the suspension of the full-scale attack. Doubts lingered as to whether this was exactly what Burj Diaz had intended all along. Burj Diaz receives the report and orders his subordinates to keep the opponent under strict surveillance. The signal sound indicating the end of the communication rings out, marking the success of Burj Diaz's plan. Burj Diaz feels a secret sense of relief. Without this intervention, the situation would have turned dire. Thanks to his capable service, Burj Diaz has successfully delayed the hero party's expedition. With the abduction of Qi Jespine, Burj Diaz's dark energy points are gradually increasing, and he considers using Armani's orb to harness her power. Meanwhile, Burj Diaz does not forget to reinforce the first floor of the tower. Under his command, Burj Diaz's forces are constantly expanding, becoming more powerful than ever before. Once Ernyan completes the contract with a high-level spirit, this fortified stronghold will become impregnable, making every expedition party hesitate. Only when all preparations are complete will Burj Diaz be able to turn his gaze to the outside world and begin his journey. Burj Diaz grinds his teeth, a murderous grin appearing on his face as he recalls those who once defeated him. To execute his plan, Burj Diaz determines that his next objective is to obtain the senile powder. Burj Diaz sets his sights on the city of Amor, known as the capital of magic engineering and a hub for countless mages. Even so, Burj Diaz cannot help but feel anxious, as infiltrating the place without being detected is truly a daunting task. In the kingdom of Akan, within the magic technological city of Amor, a towering spire stands majestically against the deep blue sky. Tucked away on the outskirts of the world's largest magical market sits a dilapidated shop. The shopkeeper is engrossed in reading the newspaper, muttering about the kidnapping of the 9th princess of Jespine. The shop's doorbell rings sharply, signaling an unexpected visitor to this desolate place. The shopkeeper eagerly greets the customer while Burj Diaz coldly demands senile powder, inwardly despising the squalor of the shop. The kingdom of Akan is renowned for its magic technology, attracting countless heroes, mages, and alchemists from across the continent. Because popular shops are always crowded, Burj Diaz has to seek out this secluded store to avoid detection, despite having masked his mana. The shopkeeper misses no opportunity, hastily claiming that today is the customer's lucky day. The shopkeeper shouts an absurd price of just 1 gold coin, leaving Burj Diaz annoyed by his noise and the exorbitant cost. Burj Diaz grows suspicious when the senile powder appears purple instead of blue, but the shopkeeper quickly explains it's a new version. The shopkeeper whispers mysteriously that this item was crafted in secret at the Mage Tower and is extremely rare. The baiting continues as the shopkeeper insists that senile powder is currently in high demand. Observing Burj Diaz's appearance, the shopkeeper assumes he is a noble and resolves to swindle him of every coin. Burj Diaz realizes the shopkeeper's scam, and a murderous intent begins to rise in his mind. The doorbell rings again, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the shop. Luai's birth appears, unable to hide her disappointment as she gazes at the wretched state of the shop. Burj Diaz is stunned to realize that the person who just entered is none other than Luai's birth. Luai's birth scolds him for revealing their trail, forcing Burj Diaz to step aside and blend into the shadows. The shopkeeper quickly shifts his attitude, warmly welcoming the powerful new customer. Burj Diaz silently concludes that with that fiery temper and distinct voice, it could be no one other than Luai's birth. Burj Diaz silently thanks the magic artifact that masked his face, preventing Luai's birth from discovering his identity. The shopkeeper persists in using his con artist tactics to deceive, which infuriates Luai's birth. Luai's birth draws her sword, warning the shopkeeper not to dare scam her, as murder is strictly prohibited in the capital. The shopkeeper trembles, frantically trying to utter a plea for mercy. With the blade pressed against his throat, the shopkeeper begs Luai's birth to calm down and make a purchase first. The shopkeeper still tries to use a forced smile to soothe Luai's birth's raging fury. Luai's birth is surprised by the shopkeeper's shamelessness, while Burj Diaz watches from the back. Luai's birth bursts into laughter, finding the shopkeeper genuinely hilarious. Luai's birth decides to give the shopkeeper a chance to prove the value of his goods. The shopkeeper rambles on, introducing Archa powder, completely ignoring that he had called it senile powder just minutes ago. Luai's birth throws 3 gold coins onto the table, forcing the shopkeeper to reveal the location of the dwarf she is tracking. The shopkeeper quickly denies knowing anything, then points Luai's birth toward a shop near the market square. Luai's birth nods in satisfaction and signals her companions to leave. Burj Diaz watches from afar, unable to help but mock Luai's birth for being so easily duped by a swindler. Luai's birth and her companions walk quickly out of the shop, heading toward the square. Burj Diaz approaches the shopkeeper, teasing him for managing to swindle 3 gold coins from Luai's birth. The shopkeeper is undeterred, nonchalantly demanding 10 gold coins to teach his swindling secrets to Burj Diaz. Witnessing the shopkeeper's audacity, Burj Diaz is left speechless. Despite his contempt, Burj Diaz recognizes the man's talent for deception and decides to recruit him into his organization. The shopkeeper looks skeptical about the credibility of the organization Burj Diaz is building. Burj Diaz flashes a cryptic smile, deciding it's time to play his trump card. Burj Diaz whispers, reminding the merchant of the identity of the guest who just left. The potion bottle in the merchant's hand shatters into pieces the moment he hears the name Luai's birth. The merchant trembles violently, terrified by the fearsome reputation the world has bestowed upon Luai's birth. Burj Diaz places a gold coin on the table, delivering an ultimatum that forces the merchant to join their cause. Merchant begs desperately with folded hands, he wants nothing to do with Luai's birth. Suddenly, the merchant's expression shifts to a smirk, revealing the cunning nature of a professional scammer. The merchant shouts, challenging Burj Diaz to call Luai's birth back, convinced that it wasn't really her. Burj Diaz doesn't say a word, he turns his back and walks straight out of the shop. The merchant watches Burj Diaz's retreating figure, a sense of foreboding washing over him. An explosion of killing intent, and Luai's birth appears right at the doorstep, surrounded by a terrifying crimson aura. The merchant's face turns deathly pale, his eyes wide with sheer horror. The merchant's piercing scream echoes throughout the entire neighborhood. Burj Diaz walks away leisurely, leaving the merchant to face the wrath of Luai's birth. Holding the real pouch of powder, Burj Diaz curses the merchant for selling him a fake one earlier. Luai's birth catches sight of Burj Diaz still standing there and approaches him with an annoyed expression. Luai's birth is delighted to have retrieved her money and turns to ask Burj Diaz about the merchant's fate. Luai's birth grinds her teeth in anger, regretting that she hadn't dealt with the merchant more brutally. Burj Diaz furrows his brow, his eyes filled with suspicion as he notices something unusual about that heart. Burj Diaz approaches Luai's birth, directly asking for the whereabouts of a blacksmith named Lozier. Burj Diaz holds up the necklace, and the merchant is astonished to recognize it as one of Lozier's early masterpieces. Merchant recalls a chance encounter with Lozier in the Ormus forest 2 months ago where he shared food with the exhausted blacksmith. Suddenly, a bolt of realization strikes Burge Diaz's mind. Luai's birth gives Burge Diaz a precious item, a key to obtaining top-tier equipment from the Dwarven Kingdom in exchange for his assistance. Luai's birth demands that Burge Diaz contact her father to set the plan for capturing the target into motion immediately. Killing intent erupts as Luai's birth swears that this time, Lozier will not escape her grasp. Burge Diaz watches Luai's birth walk away, his mind drifting back to memories of the power held by a magical beast's heart. In his past life, a powerful individual absorbed the heart of a magical beast, thereby achieving strength far beyond human limits. That is the very source of power Burge Diaz has been craving for so long. As a new Demon King, Burge Diaz understands he is limited by dimensional rules, making a direct confrontation with Luai's birth too risky right now. To exact his revenge and survive, Burge Diaz needs a wiser plan. Luai's birth's destination is the Beast Tower, where destiny awaits. Luai's birth will plunge into a bloody battle there. Facing off against the enemy, the two will tear each other apart in an uncompromising fight. That is the golden opportunity for Burge Diaz to make his move and reap the rewards. Burge Diaz smiles, his hands ready to seize the powerful magical beast heart.